Chapter 1147. With Tong Long's good performance, Tong Sheng was like a tiger that had grown wings. In the big city of the Jinzhou Left Guard, there was no one who dared to not give him face. However, all of this changed when Tong Long and his 3,000 elite cavalrymen suddenly disappeared. Tong Sheng and Tong Long were father and son. One was a businessman, while the other was an official. When one of them was missing, the problem naturally arose. The cake was only so big, and most of it was still controlled by the Tong family. Now that there was finally a chance to redistribute it, who would give up this opportunity? During this period of time, the Tong family had become the target of public criticism. They had become the target of everyone's attacks, both openly and secretly. Even Chindula, as the commander, had begun to take sides, as if he wanted to help another family rise in the city. The Tong clan's days became harder and harder, and they were getting worse day by day. At this moment, Tong Long suddenly appeared in front of his father, which made Tong Sheng extremely excited. "My son, you're back? Ha, that's great. Let's see who dares to make things difficult for our Tong family this time." Tong Sheng, who had always been expressionless, actually had such a reaction after seeing his son. Just from this point alone, one could see how much pressure he had been under during this period of time and how difficult his days had been. "Father, I'm unfilial. I've had a bad start." Tong Long knelt in front of Tong Sheng and lowered his proud head. "Don't say that. Victory and defeat are common in war. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. How about this? You can immediately go to the Yamen and restore your official position first." Tong Sheng knew that Chundula was not in the city, so he decided to restore his son's official position first and properly intimidate the other opponents in the open and in the dark. Looking at his father's wrinkled face, Tong Long swallowed his saliva first, then said in a calm voice, "Father, I can't go to the Yamen." "Why? Is it because you lost the battle?" "It's fine, didn't I say? Victory and defeat are common in war. Besides, who really won against the 5-star army? It's fine. We could just spend more money." After operating in the Jinzhou Left Guard city for decades, Tong Sheng still had some family assets. Naturally, his words were more forceful. "Money? How much money do we have now?" Speaking of this matter, Tong Long was also very curious. He only knew that the family had some extra money, but he really did not ask how much it was. It wasn't that he was ambitious, but that he didn't have any needs in this aspect. Speaking of this matter, Tong Sheng's face burst out into a smile like a blooming flower. "Son, you've finally grown up. You know how much money we have at home." "Haha, if others asked me like this, I wouldn't tell them. However, I will hand it over to you in the future. Therefore, I won't hide it from you. Listen, we've saved 300,000 taels of silver. It's not a problem for us to restore your official position with this money." 300,000 taels was undoubtedly an astronomical figure in the eyes of ordinary people. Didn't Zhong Cheng kill Song Yong for 100,000 taels of silver? In the end, he was beheaded and separated from his family. Looking at his father's proud appearance, Tong Long did not feel the slightest bit of joy. Instead, he sighed. His father had worked hard for so many years, and after operating for so many years, he only managed to save 300,000 taels of silver. Yet, he was already so happy. He didn't know if he should say that it was a kind of sorrow. In front of his father, Tong Long revealed a calm expression. His right hand slowly reached into his pocket, and then he easily took out 500,000 taels of silver. "Father, what do you think this is?" "Silver." Tong Sheng's eyes weren't blurry, and he recognized the item in front of him at first glance. When he took a closer look, he realized that it was Yang Xie's 500,000 taels of silver. When he realized that it could be exchanged at any Yang family bank, his eyes widened. Where did this come from?" "Of course, it was given to me by the 5-star army. I won't hide it from Father. I am now a member of the 5-star army. Because of my outstanding strength and outstanding performance, I am now a company commander. Of course, I am confident that I can lead more troops in the future." When he spoke of this, Tong Long's arrogant side appeared again. Ever since Tong Long was captured by Commander Bai Shuang, he couldn't accept it. When he woke up and ate a large amount of food, he started to shout loudly. What he meant was that he couldn't accept it. If it wasn't for the five-star army strategy that caused them to be exhausted, he definitely had the ability to fight it out and even win. Logically speaking, a captive shouldn't have the right to speak. Even in ancient times, such people didn't even have basic human rights. However, Bai Shuang didn't take away his right to shout. On the contrary, he got someone to release him. Not only him, the other 2,000-plus captives were also released. They were surrounded by 4 groups of 2,000 soldiers. The only difference was that one group had weapons and war horses while the other group had nothing. What are they doing? Are they trying to kill us? Since that's the case, we will fight it out with them. We don't have any weapons. Even if we bite with our teeth and tear with our hands, we can't just sit there and wait for death. Seeing their 2,000-plus men being surrounded by the 5-star army's 2,000 cavalry, many of their faces changed greatly. Some of them were already prepared to fight to the death. It had to be said that although Tong Long lost this time, the soldiers he brought still had some backbone. If it was a normal army, they would have already knelt down and begged for mercy under such circumstances. Naturally, there were also people who were calm in the crowd, such as Tong Long. He didn't believe that the other party would kill them. If that was the case, there would be no need for such a formation. Wouldn't it be better to just kill them one by one? Releasing all of them was a kind of danger in itself. Of course, it was also a kind of attitude. He didn't believe that the 5-star army didn't even have a bit of common sense. Therefore, at this moment, he wasn't nervous at all. Instead, he squinted his eyes and looked at Bai Shuang, who was wearing a black cloak. He wanted to see what the other party was up to. Just as Tong Long expected, Bai Shuang didn't give the order to kill the captives. There were so many young men with good riding skills. Most of them were Han. If he killed them just like that, even his teacher wouldn't let him off. The reason why he had brought all these people out was because he wanted to use his powerful force to subdue them. Therefore, he opened his mouth and said, "You don't have to be afraid. We don't want to kill you. We just want to prove that we are stronger than you." All right, didn't someone say that they weren't convinced? All right, we will give them a chance to show off now. No matter if it's one-on-one or many-on-many, we will accept it. But if you lose this time, please put down your pride. All right, since it's a bet, there should be some stakes. How about this? If you can win, we will let you go unconditionally. On the other hand, if you lose, you must stay and join the 5-star army. How about it? Are you serious? The moment Bai Shuang finished speaking, Tong Long was the first to ask. Of course, there are so many brothers here. How can this be a game? Plus, we always keep our words in the army. You don't have to doubt us, Bai Shuang said in an incomparably confident tone. This time, the army camp was in an uproar. This was especially true for some of the men who were confident in their strength. They had always been fearless. Now that they had a chance to prove themselves, how could they let go? Immediately, many people began to take the initiative to sign up. They wanted to prove themselves with their own strength and also to save themselves. Bai Shuang didn't reject these people. He ordered people to bring over the war horses that were captured before. Then, he gave everyone who wanted to fight a wooden scimitar. This was originally the weapon that the 1st Cavalry Division used to train. With such a weapon, they didn't have to worry about killing people. At most, they would only suffer some minor injuries. The first to fight were the 100 captives. Their opponents were the 100 cavalry warriors of the 4th Regiment. In front of everyone, the two sides pulled apart a distance of 2 li. Then, under the shout of Bai Shuang, the temporary referee, both sides began to exert their strength and charged at each other. It had to be said that the cavalry that caught Tong Long's eye and brought out were quite strong. They charged from afar, waving their wooden scimitars and doing all kinds of difficult tricks on horses. Loud battle cries came from their mouths. Their imposing manner was extraordinary. In comparison, the 100 soldiers of the 4th Regiment seemed to be weaker. They didn't shout or shout. Instead, they kept moving forward in silence. As they moved forward, they kept changing their formation. The 100 people quickly formed a formation of 5-tip of the arrow. Then, they collided with the 100 captives in a way that could pierce through their hearts. 1 chopstick was easily broken. 10 chopsticks couldn't be broken. When the two sides began to collide, the tip of the arrow array displayed its unique and powerful strength. Under the coordination of each other, the soldiers of the 4th Regiment only needed to take care of the enemies in front of them. As for their left, right, and back, there were naturally other comrades in charge of protecting them. This allowed them to maximize their attacking power. On the contrary, the captives were fighting for themselves. Those who had a good relationship with each other only cooperated in 2s and 3s. In the face of the tip of the arrow, which was a group of 20, it was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. In just one exchange, a quarter of the 100 captives fell. Then it was time to charge again and again, entangling the enemy. Soon, the captives realized that every time they attacked with their scimitars, they could only attack one opponent. However, there would often be multiple scimitars slashing at them. Moreover, it was continuous. One move after another, one move after another. It was impossible to guard against. Chapter 1148. Under the relentless attacks, more and more captive soldiers were cut down by the wooden scimitars and fell off their horses. In less than half an hour, all 100 captive soldiers had fallen off their horses. On the other hand, only 2 of the 4 groups of soldiers had fallen off their horses. Moreover, they had only been hit on the arms and were not seriously injured. In comparison, the difference in strength was obvious. The captive soldiers who were clamoring to teach the 5-star army a lesson all lowered their heads. Only now did they realize that even if the enemy did not use any tricks, they would still be the ones to lose in a direct battle. Tong Long saw everything with his eyes. When he saw the 5-star army working together so closely, he revealed an envious expression. It could not be helped. Tong Long was an all-rounder. It was not that he had never thought of using cavalry to fight together, but the soldiers under him were all arrogant and unruly. In addition, they had not met any worthy opponents. It was too difficult to gather them together for training. No matter what, the 5-star army had taught them a lesson. Seeing this, many of the captive soldiers were already convinced. However, as their commander, Tong Long naturally would not be so easily convinced. Seeing that no one stood out to challenge him, he held the wooden scimitar in his hand and said to Bai Shuang, who was wearing a black cloak, "You should be the commander of these people. Since that is the case, I will challenge you. Do you dare to accept?" I have already lost to you once. Why should I be afraid of you?" Bai Shuang laughed loudly as he spurred his horse forward. For safety reasons, he did not hold his spear. Instead, he held a pair of wooden scimitars and rode out on his horse. Dual blades? Seeing Bai Shuang come out with dual blades, Tong Long was stunned at first. Then he laughed loudly. It seemed that dual blades were naturally more powerful than a single blade. However, this was a battle on horseback. If one was not careful and did not control his strength well, he would fall off the horse. Was he not afraid of such a problem with dual blades? What? Are you afraid? Or should I give you a blade? Bai Shuang smiled lightly. He did not show any displeasure because of the other party's mockery. There is no need for that. But let me remind you, with dual blades in hand, you won't have the chance to control your warhorse. I'm very strong, so don't blame me if I knock you off your horse. Tong Long had never used dual blades before, so he naturally wouldn't do that. However, for the sake of a fair battle, he could not help but remind White Shuang. Little did he know that in order to become a soldier of the 1st Cavalry Division, the first thing one needed to do was to learn how to use dual blades. Without this ability, one would never be able to enter the division. As the leader of one of the regiments, although White Shuang's dual blade techniques were not the best, he was still stronger than ordinary warriors. He had this confidence. Thanks for the reminder. Can we begin? Bai Shuang said nonchalantly. All right, you have to be careful. Seeing that White Shuang was still holding dual blades and had no intention of changing, Tong Long snorted coldly and urged his horse forward. Although he was still a distance away, he waved his blade several times. It was obvious that he was preparing for the final battle. It was often seen in movies or TV series that when cavalry charged, they would habitually wave their weapons while still a distance away. This was not to show off, but to brace themselves. This was to maximize the strength of their bodies. This way, they would be able to maximize their strength when fighting with their opponents. Like Tong Long, White Shuang had already raised his dual blades and shouted loudly. He did not have any intention of underestimating Tong Long. This was also Yang Qindong's request for them. Even when facing the weakest opponent, they had to give their all. Only then would they be able to remain undefeated. The wind and the crane were jittery. At this moment, even the wind seemed to have stopped. It was just watching the battle between the two warriors, waiting for the result of the battle. Dang, dang, dang. The distance of 2 li was covered in the blink of an eye. Soon, the two of them collided. Then, the sound of weapons clashing rang out. Every time there was a loud bang, the two of them would involuntarily move. They were releasing all the power that the other party had imbued into their bodies through their weapons. Although they were holding wooden scimitars, the two of them were playing with them as if they were made of iron. In a short period of time, the two of them had exchanged no less than 20 rounds, and there was still no clear winner. Tong Long was indeed a fierce general. His blade skills were strong and powerful, and the strength in his body was endless. It gave people the feeling that he was an unending mountain. On the other hand, Bai Shuang was able to become Yang Qindong's student and was appointed as the commander of the strongest cavalry, the 1st Cavalry Division's 4th Regiment. His strength was not ordinary either. After exchanging 20 moves, his expression did not change, and his heart was not panting. It was obvious that he had not used his full strength. Tian, who was the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, under his strict requirements, as long as the conditions allowed, every cavalry soldier would swing their blades at least 1,000 times a day. Even in between battles, this rule had never changed. With this kind of hard training, swinging their blades seemed to have become an instinct. Every time they swung their blades, they would need to use their full strength. However, it was only 20 moves, which was equivalent to an adult man running about 5 meters. It was really nothing. 30 rounds, 40 rounds, 50 rounds. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged nearly 60 rounds. Under the situation where they used all their strength, the scales of victory began to tilt. Tong Long, who was originally full of fighting spirit, began to feel weak. Although Tong Long also trained regularly, especially on horseback, the training time was not short. However, compared to Bai Shuang's training time, it was still a little short. The main difference was that they lacked a training atmosphere. For example, why did many outstanding soldiers' physical fitness begin to decline after they retired from the army? Even if they did not exercise when they returned home, why was it the same? Speaking of this, it had to be the environment, which was the element of atmosphere. When they were in the army, they had many comrades to accompany them. While they were chasing each other and could not slack off, training also became a kind of work and interest. However, when they were alone, it was completely different. Without a comparison, they might involuntarily want to rest for a while when they were tired. As time passed, naturally the gap between them would become bigger and bigger. It was precisely because Tong Long did not have such a good environment that he could match Bai Shuang in a short period of time. However, as time passed, the disadvantage became more and more obvious. This was especially so after 50 rounds when White Shuang used 2 swords. Under the continuous attacks, he could only defend himself and could not attack. When all the soldiers who were watching saw this, they could basically see the outcome of the battle. Some of the captives who had placed their hopes on General Tong Long had no choice but to lower their heads. Even the strongest person on their side was not a match for the other party. How could they fight this battle? Sure enough, it was as everyone expected. In the 65th round, Tong Long, who had been bitterly defending, finally revealed a flaw. Because his blade was not fast enough, the hole in his chest was wide open. Using this opportunity, Bai Shuang chopped down and hit him in the chest. If Bai Shuang had not held back, just this attack alone would not have taken his life, but at least a few of his ribs would have been broken. With a plop, Tong Long finally fell off his horse. When he fell to the ground, he was still panting heavily. It could be felt that the battle just now had exhausted him. Swoosh! A wooden blade accurately pressed 30 centimeters in front of Tong Long's throat. Then Bai Shuang's voice sounded, "You lost." "Yes, I lost. I am willing to repay my loss. I want to join your 5-star army." "I don't know if that is possible." Tong Long did not have the dispirited appearance of a loser. On the contrary, although he was still panting heavily and his chest was heaving up and down, his eyes were shining brightly. Clearly, he felt that he had found the direction of his life. Seeing that Tong Long was not discouraged after being defeated, Bai Shuang chuckled and sheathed his saber. Of course, the five-star army welcomes anyone with insight and ability to join. I think we will be comrades in the future. Bai Shuang had accepted Tong Long, and this made the other captives see hope as well. Immediately, there were many who wanted to join the five-star army, and the seemingly dangerous competition ended with a unanimous decision. Because of this, the five-star army had an additional 2,000 cavalrymen. Among them, there were at least 1,000 of them who were elites. What they lacked was the corresponding training. Once they understood how to cooperate in battle, there was no doubt that they would be a strong army. Just like that, Tong Long joined the five-star army. He was even appointed as a company commander by Bai Shuang. He led 100 elite cavalrymen under him. This time, he was the one who requested to return to the Jian province left guard. He wanted to perform meritorious deeds. A company commander was not enough to satisfy him. He wanted to take over the Jian province left guard and give it to Bugnam of Gojoseon as a gift. After seriously listening to his son's story, Tong Sheng really did not know what to say at this moment. Although he had seen the problems of corruption in the Great Ming Dynasty and the bitter lives of the people, the Great Ming Dynasty was still the Great Ming Dynasty. They had a population of 60 million and an army of millions. Such a huge force would undoubtedly be the best target to rely on. But now his son had chosen Bugnam of Gojoseon, who was the enemy of the Great Ming Dynasty. It was simply unrealistic and impossible for him to immediately express his support. Tong Sheng stood there for a long time without saying anything. Tong Long guessed his father's thoughts and knew that there were some things that needed to be said. This was because without his father's support, his plan could not be completed. He immediately said, "Father, you know about the Japanese Empire, right? Now he is completely submitted to Bugnam of Gojoseon. In the future, there will be no Japanese Empire. There will only be the Japanese province. It will become a part of Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory. Father, I'm afraid you still don't know. Bugnam of Gojoseon has already taken over Terran City. Among them, Commander Song Quan committed suicide, Commander Tongji Zhongcheng was killed, and Commander Yi Ligong became a general in the five-star army. Bugnam of Gojoseon has already given the order to change the Liaodong region into the 3 eastern provinces. Yi Ligong has also become the first general of the 3 eastern provinces. Chapter 1149. Right now, Wu King is leading his army towards us. Do you think that we can stop them with just our strength? If we don't make the right choice now, I'm afraid Song Quan and Zhongcheng will be our examples. Father. The information was like a huge wave hitting Tong Sheng's heart, causing his expression to change again and again. First, it was because of the isolation of information. For the sake of the overall situation, it was difficult for unfavorable news to spread to the city. Secondly, in the social environment at that time, many things often took a long time to be known by everyone. Therefore, Tong Sheng had never heard of these things that his son said. After hearing this for the first time, he was inexplicably shocked. What kind of people were the Japanese Empire? Perhaps the people in the hinterland of the Great Ming Dynasty didn't know much about them, but as the Jianzhou left guard in the Liaodong region, Tong Sheng, who was in business, knew very well. When he was transporting goods, he saw the Japanese Empire invading the border with his own eyes. He saw many Han people and Nuzarin Dai tragically in their hands. As for the strength of Song Quan and the others, he was even more clear. As the commander of the entire Liaodong region in name, Song Quan was still very prestigious among the people. But he didn't expect these people to be forced to commit suicide. Thinking about how it had only been 4 months since the five-star army appeared here, how could he not be surprised? Just how powerful was the five-star army? How could they attack a city in such a short period of time, as if they were invincible? If such a powerful army really set their sights on the Jianzhou left guard, would they be able to hold on? As the saying goes, those who recognize the times are wise. To be able to rely on a pair of hands to fight from nothing to now, Tong Sheng relied on the right choice. Now he had another chance to choose. His son was already an officer in the 5-star army. Although he was only a company commander and didn't have much power, it was still a start. At this time, as a father, how could he go against his son? After listening to this, Tong Sheng's mentality had undergone a huge change. What he didn't expect was that Tong Long's next words were like a heavy hammer that strengthened his conviction. Father, Captain Bai Shuang has already asked for instructions from Bugnam of Gojoseon and gave a detailed introduction of our family situation. Bugnam of Gojoseon has promised that as long as the Tong family can successfully take over the Jinzhou Left Guard, we will be allowed to do business here in the future. Father, you have to know that the 5-star army sells rare goods. Once you purchase goods from them, you will definitely make a profit. This will only be beneficial to the future development of our Tong family. At that time, one of us will be in business while the other will be in the military. Wouldn't that be the best way to help each other? Father, why are you still hesitating? Please help your son. In a short period of time, Tong Long had revealed all of his trump cards. He even deliberately played with the banknotes worth 500,000 taels of silver in his hand. That was more money than Tong Sheng's lifetime of hard work. Finally, Tong Long's expression changed several times before he nodded heavily and made a decision. All right, since Bugnam of Gojoseon thinks so highly of us, son, father agrees to help you. Tell me, what do you need me to do? The father and son discussed together for more than 2 hours. Afterwards, Tong Sheng stepped forward and invited all of the influential people in Jinzhou Left Guard City to the Tong residence. Not long after all of the influential people in the military, politics, and business arrived at the Tong residence, they were all surrounded by hundreds of elite soldiers. On one side was a mountain of silver. On the other side was the consequence of shaking their heads and refusing. No one was stupid enough to not know what to choose. The Jinzhou Left Guard changed sides in this lifeless situation. After controlling the situation, Tong Long personally went out of the city to welcome Captain Bai Shuang and his 4,000 men. After the army entered the city, the Baiming army in the city quickly gave up resistance and became a member of the 5-star army. When the news spread and reached the military camp more than 200 miles away, Chun Dula, who was still discussing the plan with General Li Tong, was stunned on the spot. He did not expect such a big thing to happen just because he was not in the city. Naturally, Chun Dula was also glad. If he was not in the city, he would also be faced with a choice and might even lose his head. This is outrageous. Chun Dula angrily slammed his right fist on the desk in front of him. Even though his fist was bleeding, he did not care at all. General Li Tong's face was also full of shock and disbelief. He quickly reacted and asked in surprise, General Chun, our army's rations seem to be in the city, right? Could it be? A howl came from the tent. If one listened carefully, it was Chun Dula's howl. Due to the urgency of the situation, Li Tong's army of 200,000 only brought a small amount of rations. Other than Baiming capital, who was working hard to prepare, the main logistics work was left to Chun Dula. For this reason, he ordered all the rations and extra weapons to be gathered in the Jinzhou Left Guard. Not only that, he also collected taxes from the merchants and civilians in advance. After all, in front of the 5-star army cavalry that liked to fight, there was no place safer than the Jinzhou Left Guard. It was just that no one had expected such a thing to happen so suddenly. Now, all the rations were used by the 5-star army. It was a huge loss. Chun Dula reacted quickly after the howl. He reached out and grabbed Li Tong and said, General Li, the rations and supplies are in the city. We have to get them back. We should take action now that the 5-star army hasn't stabilized. Otherwise, we won't have a chance. Li Tong naturally knew the importance of the rations. If they couldn't get them back, his army of 200,000 would only have 5 days of rations. At that time, the morale of the army would be shaken even before Bugnam of Gojoseon did anything. Okay, I'll immediately send troops to the Jinzhou Left Guard. No matter what, we have to get this city back. After an emergency meeting, Li Tong gave Chun Dula 30,000 soldiers and hurried to the Jinzhou Left Guard. Li Tong followed behind with the remaining 100,000 soldiers. No matter what, they had to get the Jianzhou left guard back. They also had to get the rations and supplies back in their hands. In the Jianzhou left guard city, Commander Bai Shuang sat at the head of the table. Looking at the situation in the city sent by his subordinates, he rubbed his forehead with a headache. Even Bai Shuang didn't expect that he would get so much rations and supplies just because he wanted to occupy the Jianzhou left guard city and find a safe place for his teacher who was about to arrive. This sudden turn of events made Bai Shuang's face flash with joy, but at the same time, she became worried. He knew that the Baiming army wouldn't leave so many things in their hands. It was very likely that they had already received the news and sent troops here. Come, quickly inform the division commanders and report the situation here. Commander Tong, please immediately summon all the surrendered Baiming army soldiers to the city. I want to talk to them. Elder Tong, I'll have to trouble you to do some logistics work. There's a lot of rations in the city. You can take as much as you want, but you must ensure that the soldiers have 3 meals a day. Is that okay? Orders were given one after another. At this moment, Bai Shuang took on the role of a division commander. He changed from a horse attack to a battle of defending the city. Everything happened so suddenly, but he really had no choice. If he didn't have a choice, then so be it. At this moment, Bai Shuang's eyes were shining. Wasn't it what he had always wanted to be able to command so many people to fight a battle of defending the city? He wanted to prove to everyone that as Yang Qindong student, he could not only kill the enemy immediately, but he could also be an excellent infantry soldier who defended the city even if he dismounted from his horse. The so-called so many people naturally didn't refer to how many people Bai Shuang had brought this time. It meant that there were many infantry soldiers in the Jianzhou left guard city. The Jianzhou left guard city belonged to the Guard Command Division and had 5,600 soldiers. This time, only 600 soldiers followed the commander, Chun Do, out of the city. Excluding the 2,000 soldiers Tong Long had brought with him, there were still 3,000 infantry soldiers in the city. With 3,000 infantrymen, 2,000 men from Bai Shuang's 4 regiments, and 2,500 captives, they had a total of 8,000 soldiers. Furthermore, they were defending the city, so it wasn't necessarily impossible for them to fight. Furthermore, he didn't need to eliminate the enemy. As long as he waited for Division Commander Tian, who to bring the main force of the division to reinforce them, all the problems would be easily solved. He had learned many things from Yang Qindong, and one of them was confidence. Using his teacher's words, confidence might not guarantee victory, but without confidence, one would definitely lose. After arranging everything, Bai Shuang felt that it was about time. He led the 5-star army out of the residence and arrived at the city gates. There were already thousands of Baiming soldiers gathered here. They stood densely together, and their faces were filled with confusion. They had already surrendered to the 5-star army. They didn't understand why they were gathered here so quickly. Considering that everyone's weapons had been confiscated, some people were worried. They were afraid that the 5-star army would suddenly turn hostile. If that was the case, then wouldn't they be at the mercy of others? As such, many people turned their gaze to General Tong Long, who was commanding the troops. From their point of view, he should be one of them, so he wouldn't be too ruthless. Not long after, Bai Shuang led a group of elite cavalry and arrived at the city gates. He only took a quick glance before walking up the city gate tower. When he could see everything below, he stopped and raised his right hand. Following this action, the 3,000 Baiming army below the city gate tower became very quiet. Seeing that everyone was so obedient, a smile flashed across Bai Shuang's face. He then looked into the distance and saw that Tong Sheng had already gathered many civilians to watch. On the other side, large pots had been set up, and pieces of delicious fatty meat were thrown into the pots. Chapter 1150. Now that everything was ready, Bai Shuang's voice came down from the city gate tower. Soldiers, I've called everyone here today to tell you that the Jianzhou Left Guard is now under the control of the 5-star army, and you will soon become a member of the 5-star army. Our 5-star army belongs to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Bugnam of Gojoseon never mistreats his subordinates, so after asking for instructions, we've decided to give each soldier 5 taels of silver. The amount is the same, so please don't think it's too little. All right, now everyone can line up to get the silver. Elder Tong, I'll have to trouble you. No problem, it's already prepared. Tong Sheng, who already knew about Bai Shuang's plan, smiled. Then, he gave an order, and the wooden boxes placed there were opened. White light flashed, and boxes of silver were placed in front of everyone. Wow, so much silver. Yes, I've never seen so much silver in my life. Shouts of surprise continued. When a large amount of silver was placed in front of them, the impact was still very strong. All right, everyone, don't just sigh. The silver is only real when it's in your hands. Now, please line up and get the silver. Of course, I want to say that from the moment you receive the silver, you will be a glorious soldier of the 5-star army. If anyone is unwilling, you can leave now. I promise that no one will make things difficult for you. Bai Shuang seemed to be talking about a very ordinary matter. But these words were not the case in the ears of the soldiers. What a joke! Who would refuse money? As for whether they were in the 5-star army or the Biming army, what difference did it make? As long as they were given money and treated well, they would listen to them and work for them. Most of the soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty were formed from military families. In other words, their fathers were military families and most of their sons would become soldiers when they grew up. This was originally set by the Great Ming Dynasty's Emperor Taizu because he was afraid that there would be no soldiers to recruit. Therefore, after a long period of habit, these people had already accepted the fact that they had to be paid as soldiers. As for whether or not they would go to war after becoming soldiers, and who they would fight against, that was not something they could consider or choose. Usually, the soldiers of the Biming army were only paid 2 taels of silver a month. Even so, there were times when they couldn't even get paid. Now that each person could receive 5 taels of silver in cash, no one would refuse such a good deal. Bai Shuang looked around and saw that none of the 3,000 people left on their own accord. They all obediently lined up to receive their silver. 3,000 people, 5 taels per person. That would be 15,000 taels of silver. This amount of money was really nothing to Bai Shuang. In his opinion, it was worth it to pay such a small price to defend the city. Even if his teacher knew about this matter, he would only praise him for being capable. There were a total of 10 teams, and everything was over in less than an hour. When Bai Shuang saw that all the soldiers had smiles on their faces with the silver in their hands, he continued, "Congratulations, everyone. You are now a member of the 5-star army. I just want to say that there will be many more good things like this in the future. As long as you work hard on the battlefield, you will receive more than this. Everyone, are you happy?" Happy. The soldiers who had just received their silver naturally stood in front of Bai Shuang and replied loudly. Very good. Bai Shuang saw that everyone had fallen into his trap, so he laughed and said, "Soldiers of the 5-star army, to tell you the truth, the Biming army will soon arrive at the city. They will most likely prepare to attack the city. In other words, your opportunity to perform has arrived." What? Are we really going to fight? Yes. Or are we going to fight the Biming army? We are the Biming army, aren't we? Biming army, my ass. We are now captives of the 5-star army. Captives, do you understand? We have no choice but to fight for power. What? Now that we have received our silver, we are no longer captives. We are now members of the 5-star army. Because of this sentence, the soldiers below began to discuss. In the end, Bai Shuang raised his right hand and calmed the crowd down. Soldiers, I know that you may have some thoughts. But what I want to say is that you have already surrendered to the 5-star army. It doesn't matter if you did it willingly or not, but it is the truth. At least the Biming army outside the city will think this way. Once the city is breached, it will be the time of your death. I don't think anyone will be merciful to soldiers who have surrendered to the enemy. Therefore, the next battle will be fought for your own sake. Seeing how certain Bai Shuang was, some soldiers who didn't want to die opened their mouths and said, We were only forced. Is that so? Bai Shuang had already expected this result. He smiled and said, But when you took the silver, you were very proactive. Everyone in the city saw it. Indeed, Bai Shuang didn't force anyone. When they took the silver, they all did it willingly. They were all very excited and happy. After he finished speaking, some of the Biming soldiers who wanted to argue shut their mouths. Using this opportunity, Bai Shuang's expression suddenly changed as he said, "You think you were forced, but will the Biming army think this way? Will the generals think this way? They will only think of you as the real five-star army. Then they will kill you and chop off your heads to give them rewards." As soon as he said this, the soldiers below were all shocked. Biming rewarded soldiers based on military merits, and military merits were closely related to the enemy's head. When that time came, no one would be able to tell whether they were the five-star army or the Biming army. Seeing that everyone was silent, Bai Shuang smiled in his heart. He knew that his plan had succeeded. He had given them the stick, and now it was time to give them the carrot. He immediately said in a loud voice, "Soldiers, whether you are willing or not, the truth can't be changed. Since we are all going to war, why not help the five-star army? You should know that what we are giving you is much more than what the Biming army gave you." Everyone can turn around and look. On your left, there is a burning cauldron. There is a lot of delicious food inside, and everyone can eat until they are full. On your right, there are countless boxes that haven't been opened yet. There's an uncountable amount of silver inside. As long as you achieve military merits on the battlefield, you can immediately come and collect it. These are things that the Biming army can't give you. What is there to hesitate about? A person's life was nothing more than wearing clothes and eating food. Those who joined the military only wanted to live a better life and rely on their own efforts to obtain more glory. Now that Bai Shuang had given them all, there was nothing to worry about. Many soldiers were shocked by what they saw. Even if they worked hard for the Biming army, they wouldn't be able to eat their fill. Sometimes they wouldn't even get paid on time. But now, not only could they eat their fill, but they also had enough meat. If they obtained military merits, they would be directly rewarded with silver. Under these conditions, it was very easy for them to make a choice. While most of the people were already tempted, there was still a small number of people who were hesitating. One of them shouted loudly in the crowd, "General, how can you guarantee that we will be given money if we make military contributions?" Bai Shuang didn't answer this question. With his status, it was useless to say anything. Thus, he looked at Tong Long, who was already a company commander. "I can answer this question. I can guarantee it on behalf of the Tong family." Tong Long spoke up in a timely manner. With his influence, no one doubted his words. Thus, no one objected. Instead, everyone started arguing about who would be the first to defend the city. To be honest, everyone was afraid of death. But from the day they became soldiers, they no longer had a choice. All they wanted was to obtain the treatment they deserved after obtaining military merits. Now, the opportunity was right in front of them. Bai Shuang also said that no matter who died in battle, the five-star army would give their family 20 taels of silver. Based on this, why wouldn't they fight with their lives on the line? If they died, they could leave something for their family. If they didn't die, they would have a boundless future. This was something they didn't even dare to think about in the past. The reason why Bai Shuang gave these soldiers 20 taels of silver was because many of them were Han people. If they were from other races, 10 taels of silver would be the most they could get. From this, it could be seen that in times of war, the most worthless thing was probably human life. The Jian province left guard was fully prepared. Under Bai Shuang's leadership, everything was carried out in an orderly manner. Kerosene, rolling wood, bows, and arrows were all carried up the city gate tower. This was also thanks to Chun Dula's command department. Originally, these things were prepared to be used to deal with the five-star army. Now, Bai Shuang and the others had benefited from it. Outside the city, Chun Dula was quickly approaching with an army of 30,000. Obviously, this command department wanted to use the time difference to catch the Jian province left guard off guard and take back everything they had lost. However, when he arrived at the city gate tower and saw that the colorful five-star flag had already been placed on the city gate tower, and his former soldiers were all ready for battle, he had a very bad feeling in his heart. The other party was already prepared. It was obviously impossible to launch a surprise attack. Shindo had no choice but to take a step back and settle for the next best thing. He was prepared to persuade these soldiers who were originally loyal to him. If they were willing to pledge allegiance to him again, it would be very easy to take down the Jianzhou left guard by cooperating from the inside and outside. Riding a warhorse, under the protection of a dozen bodyguards, Chindula arrived at the city gate tower. He raised his head and looked at his former soldiers standing majestically on the battlements. He shouted loudly, "Soldiers, I am Chindula. I am your commander. Now, I order you to open the city gate." Chapter 1151. His voice was not soft, but he was met with silence. How could the Baiming army soldiers, who had been convinced and successfully tempted by Bai Shuang, betray him just because of a few words? "What's wrong? Don't you understand what I'm saying? I've treated you well all these years. Hurry up and open the city gate. Otherwise, once I lead the army into the city, none of you will be spared. Even your families will be implicated. Is that what you want to see?" Chundula saw that his order was ignored, so he angrily threatened them. Needless to say, this shout did have some effect. For the ordinary Baiming soldiers, Chundula had always been a superior existence. They had to carefully ponder the words of such a person. Although Bai Shuangshu had given them a lot of benefits, if the Jinzhou left guard was defeated, these benefits would be gone. This was something they didn't dare to think about. In a corner of the city gate tower, Bai Shuang was watching Chundula's act. When he saw that the other party was even threatening him, he could not help but coldly snort. Then, he said to a soldier beside him, "Pass down the order. It's time to teach this commander a lesson." The order flag on the city gate tower was waved. Immediately, the west gate of the Jian province left guard was opened. When the thick and heavy city gate creaked, Chundula, who still wanted to continue his threats, immediately smiled. "Haha, can we talk nicely? Why do I have to scare you? Sigh, these soldiers are really despicable." After these words came out of his mouth, Chindula suddenly widened his eyes. Then, without any scruples, he turned around and fled. He had already seen that the people who came out of the city gate were not ordinary Baiming soldiers, but thousands of cavalrymen led by Tong Long. The Jian province left guard was easily taken down by the five-star army because of Tong Long. Chindula already knew about this. Now that he saw this person riding out, how could he not know what was going to happen? Considering that this person had always been very brave, and even Chundula was no match for him in a one-on-one fight. If not now, when would he be able to escape? Just as Chundula turned to flee, so anxious that he didn't even notify his personal guards, Tong Long had already led his 25,000 cavalry out of the west gate. At this moment, Tong Long had already been appointed as a battalion commander by Bai Shuang, and the cavalry that originally belonged to him had been returned to him. This kind of trust and use made Tong Long shed tears of gratitude. He swore in his heart that he would definitely perform well. Therefore, at this moment, he rushed out with all his might. If Chindula had not seen the situation and fled quickly, he might have really been left behind by him. Although Chindula managed to escape, it was a pity that he only brought a dozen men with him. Apart from two of them who managed to escape quickly, the rest of them were all captured. One of them even tried to hold Tong Long back by relying on his martial strength, but was beheaded with a single slash. His goal was not to scare Chindula away. Using this opportunity to leave the city, Tong Long led his 2,500 cavalry and charged straight at the 30,000 Baiming army that were completely unprepared. This was not going according to the script at all. The 30,000 Baiming army were also confused. They were supposed to be the ones attacking, but now they were the ones being attacked. Since they were completely unprepared, and the 30,000 infantrymen that came were all infantrymen, Tong Long destroyed their first line of defense in just one exchange. If it wasn't for the fact that the 30,000 men were so crowded that they couldn't retreat even if they wanted to, they might have been directly scattered. On the city gate tower, Bai Shuang saw everything. When he saw that the 30,000 Baiming infantrymen were actually so weak, his eyes couldn't help but light up. Originally, he thought that since the enemy had so many people, he should focus on defense. He never thought that an opportunity would appear in front of him. How could he be polite? He immediately led his men down the city gate tower, and then led the 2,000 five-star army cavalry that were already prepared for battle and charged out of the city. Originally, Tong Long was prepared to take advantage of the situation and leave. However, he didn't receive the signal to retreat. Then he saw Bai Shuang leading his army and charging out. At this moment, if he still didn't know what to do, then he would have led his troops in vain. Brothers, continue to attack. Commander Bai is here to support us. Tong Long shouted as he continued to urge his horse to attack. He did his best to maintain the momentum of the charge and not give the Baiming army a chance to counterattack and regain their morale. In less than half an incense stick's worth of time, Bai Shuang led his 2,000 men from the 1st Cavalry Division over. If Tong Long and his men's attack was like a light rain and a level 4 wind, then their appearance was like a rainstorm and a level 7 wind. They unsheathed their swords and slashed out more than 10 times in a short period of time. Especially with the help of the array formation at the tip of the arrows, they quickly pierced through the defense of the northern Ming army. When the 2nd layer of the human wall was also broken down, and before the 3rd layer of the human wall was completely built, they began to kill. Even though Yang Shindong had said before that if possible, they should try not to kill the Han soldiers. However, this was a matter of life and death, and they couldn't care less. In this battle of life and death, the 2,000 cavalry of the number 1 Cavalry Division fully displayed their bravery and what it meant to be unstoppable. Under the storm-like attacks, the formation attacks were like arrows piercing through the air. One by one, the Baiming army soldiers were cut down to the ground, and the soldiers who wanted to establish a defensive line were sent flying by the charge of their warhorses. As their morale continued to soar, the advantage of the 5,000 cavalry became greater and greater, and the morale of the Baiming army began to waver. No one knew who was the first to turn and flee, but it caused a chain reaction that caused the entire army to collapse. The 30,000 Baiming army did not even have a chance to stand firm before they were defeated. Riding on his warhorse, Chindula still had a look of lingering fear on his face. Seeing that the situation was over, he knew that there was no way to turn the situation around. He could only hatefully turn and leave. Since their general had left, how could the soldiers under him continue to risk their lives? It was really death, escape, death, and injury. The 30,000 soldiers left behind a ground full of corpses and captives, and in the end, only 10,000 managed to escape. With 4,500 cavalry, not only had they defeated the 30,000 Baiming army, they had also killed 5,000 and captured 15,000. This kind of accomplishment caused the surrendered Baiming army soldiers to be dumbfounded. In the past, they had been talking about how powerful the 5-star army was. This time, they had really opened their eyes. The capture of captives and the cleaning of the battlefield continued until nighttime. Even so, it was still not completely cleaned up. Considering that there was no one in Jinzhou's Zhuowei city who belonged to him, Bai Shuang still brought his men back to the city. Seeing their return, everyone looked at them with respect. When Bai Shuang saw Tong Sheng at the city gate leading the people to welcome him, he first laughed and then said, "Everyone has worked hard in this battle. In a while, we will reward you according to your contributions. Don't worry, even the soldiers who defended the city will be rewarded. By the way, the battlefield outside the city has not been cleaned up yet. If there are any people who want to help, you can go now. Don't worry, you only need to hand over 80% of the things you picked up. The remaining 20% is yours." What? Is this true? The people who were originally lining the streets to welcome them were shocked when they heard this. They were not here to support the 5-star army. Although they had won the battle and protected Jinzhou's Zhuowei city, in the eyes of most people, even if Chun Dula took back this place, they would not be too surprised or flustered. After all, they were just ordinary people. To them, it did not matter who the emperor was. The reason why they came here was because Tong Sheng promised to share the meat soup that the soldiers drank. This was the real benefit. But now, they suddenly heard that they could also get benefits. Moreover, they could get 20% of whatever they took. This was something that they had never thought of before. That's right. Our 5-star army will definitely keep our word. I just want to remind everyone that the things you took must be handed over to the government. Once someone is found to have embezzled, it will be a crime. Then, there will be a big problem. Other people can also supervise each other. If you find out, you can report it. As the informant, You can get 50% of the things as a reward. Bai Shuang used the set of rules that he saw when he was with Yang Chendong. Back then, when he asked the people to clean up the battlefield, he used this method. Although it could not completely eliminate embezzlement, more than 90% of the things could be retrieved. Of course, we will do such a good thing. Don't worry. With us here, we will definitely not let anyone take things home. That's right. Such a good thing cannot be ruined because of one or two people. We have to be conscious and supervise each other. These words quickly attracted the support of the people. After that, there was no welcoming ceremony. Even though the sky was already dark, there were still many commoners who left the city with torches and ran towards the battlefield outside the city. There was a lot of wealth waiting for them there. If they could pick up some iron weapons, they would definitely be able to sell them to the 5-star army for a good price. When most of the people had left, Tong Sheng came to Bai Shuang with a worried face. Commander Bai, are we really going to let the people help? Once they have money, will they listen to our orders? Just like just now, if it wasn't for the meat soup, I'm afraid that they wouldn't have come out to welcome the victorious army. Tong Sheng's thinking had become a common problem among the people in power. They didn't want the people to be so poor that they couldn't even afford to eat, but they also didn't want them to be so rich that they wouldn't listen to their orders. But they didn't know that if a country really wanted to be rich and powerful, they had to learn how to hide their wealth from the people. As long as the people had money in their hands, they would protect their rights and interests from being violated. When faced with an invading enemy, they would do their best to protect them. It wouldn't be like now, where no one cared about the outcome of the war. Chapter 1152. These words were said by Yang Chendong, so Bai Shuang naturally believed them without a doubt. Now that he saw Tong Sheng so anxious, he comforted him and said, "Don't worry, everything is under control. By the way, Elder Tong, thank you for helping to defend the city this time. I will definitely report your contribution. I'm sure Bugnam of Gojoseon won't mistreat you." Speaking of his own matters, Tong Sheng was a little reserved. He smiled and said, "Well said, well said." Not to mention what happened in Jinzhou's left guard city. Chindula had only run a few dozen miles when he met General Li Tong, who came to his rescue. He brought a total of 170,000 Baiming army with him. Originally, he thought that if everything went smoothly, he could directly take over the Jinzhou left guard. However, when he saw Chun Dulasari's state and the number of troops that were obviously less than when he sent out his troops, he frowned. "General Chun, it seems that everything is not going well. Sigh, the other party didn't play by the rules. My troops were defeated." Chindula seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. After all, many of the cavalry that chased after him were originally soldiers of the Jinzhou left guard, which meant that they were his troops. He had been the commander of the Jinzhou left guard for many years and thought that he was in control of everything. However, now that he was defeated by his own troops, one could imagine how depressed and disappointed he was. "What exactly happened?" Li Tong said with an unfriendly expression. This was an army of 30,000, and now only 1/3 of them had returned. The difference was too great. Although it was a little embarrassing, it had already happened and there was no way to hide it. Therefore, Chundula explained everything in detail. In the end, he said, "The cavalry of the 5-star army is indeed powerful. Although we have the advantage in numbers, without preparation, we can't use our advantage in numbers at all. This time, I was careless and thought that the other party wouldn't dare to make a move. Generally, I beg for your forgiveness." Li Tong's expression was very ugly. He wanted to say that he was indeed guilty. He had lost 20,000 troops in an instant and even deserved death. However, Li Tong didn't dare to punish him for his crimes. Putting aside the fact that Chundula was a third-rank military official in the imperial court, just like him, he didn't have the authority to set up a court. Furthermore, this was the Liaodong region, and Chundula had been operating here for many years. It was impossible to say that he didn't have any connections. If he dared to kill such a person, he would definitely receive the full force of the other guards. If that was the case, it would be strange if he felt good about it. Even if he could not incriminate Chindu La, Li Tong would not let Chindu La have a good time. After thinking for a while, he said, "General Chun, No matter what, we have lost 20,000 soldiers and horses this time. Moreover, all of our provisions have been taken away. The provisions of our army will not last for more than a few days. Do you think this was an opportunity for Chun-Do to perform meritorious deeds and also to negotiate conditions? If you don't want to be punished, you have to do something. How could Chun-Do La not understand? He immediately patted his chest and promised, "Generally, don't worry. I am very familiar with this area. Whoever has money and provisions is in my heart. How about this? I will go find them now and collect taxes again. Then I will have to trouble you, General Chun." Li Tong was waiting for this sentence. Only at this moment did his expression become better. The two of them immediately divided the work. They decided that tomorrow morning, Li Tong would lead his troops out of the Jian province left guard and try to take over the place. Chun-Do La would go to the nearby area to collect provisions. No matter what, they couldn't let the army starve. Not to mention the process of collecting provisions and the resentment of the people by Chun-Do La's 10,000 soldiers. Li Tong and his army of 170,000 arrived at Jian province left guard city the next morning. From afar, banners were fluttering in the wind, and soldiers were standing guard. It looked like they were ready for battle. Looks like the other side has a lot of soldiers. How about this? Arrange someone to call the city. Oh, right. Before you go, you must prepare the defense, especially the horse-repelling stakes. You must arrange more of them. With the previous example of Chun-Do La's army being defeated, Li Tong didn't dare to be careless. That's right, Jian province left guard seemed to have a lot of soldiers standing guard. What Li Tong didn't know was that most of them were his comrades in the Baiming army yesterday. It turned out that Bai Shuang was still worried about the lack of soldiers. In yesterday's battle, he directly took 15,000 captives. He used the method of giving them money to win them over. This time, he didn't give them much money, only 2 taels per captive. In his words, they would be heavily rewarded after they achieved military merits. The Baiming captives firmly believed this point, because just last night, they saw with their own eyes that the 3,000 captive soldiers of the Jinzhou left guard left behind in the city, although they didn't leave the city to fight, because of their contribution to the defense of the city, each of them was rewarded with 1 tael of silver. They didn't do anything, but they received money. Such a good thing really happened in front of them. Just based on this, everyone believed in Bai Shuang's words. With the addition of these 15,000 captives, Bai Shuang was full of confidence. He was no longer thinking about how to defend the city, but how to cooperate with the 1st Cavalry Division's main force to destroy the Baiming army. The persuasion to surrender began. A Baiming emissary who was eloquent came to the city and shouted loudly. It was nothing more than that if they surrendered now, they could live. Otherwise, once the city was captured, everyone who helped the 5-star army would be punished, and so on. These words could be said to be useless. On the contrary, under this threat, it only made the captives rely on the 5-star army even more. Bai Shuang watched from a city gate tower without any intention of stopping. This gave the Baiming emissary even more confidence. He thought that Bai Shuang was really afraid. As a result, his threats became even more intense. When the soldiers on the city gate were about to get anxious, Bai Shuang saw that the time was right and ordered to shoot arrows. This scared away the Baiming emissary who came to persuade them to surrender. Since the persuasion failed, Li Tong had no choice but to start a siege. In order to show his military strength as much as possible, he prepared 4 echelons, each with 5,000 men. They would attack the city in turns. He wanted to let the 5-star army know how powerful he was and not give them any time to rest. In the end, he would win by exhausting them. Since ancient times, the side that attacked the city would always be at a disadvantage. After all, they had to charge into a dangerous area that was hundreds of meters away. They also had to brave the dangers of arrows, crossbows, and kerosene to reach the city gate tower. With this advantage, Bai Shuang only arranged for 3,000 men to defend the city gate tower at once. He could already see that the other side wanted to fight a war of attrition. Since that was the case, he would play with them. The battle began in the afternoon. Using the ladders that had been prepared beforehand, the Northern Ming army launched a frenzied attack on the city. Below the city walls were densely packed soldiers who were charging forward. They shouted loudly and continuously charged forward with swords in their left hand and shields in their right hand. Under the leadership of Bai Shuang, the five-star army on the city gate tower counterattacked in an orderly manner. From afar, they used bows and arrows. From close range, they used boulders, crossbows, and kerosene. They fully displayed their advantage of being in a high position and repelled the enemy wave after wave. From afternoon to night, 2 groups of 5,000 men were defeated. Facing this result, Li Tong's expression didn't change. This was already within his expectations. However, no matter how much he had to pay, he didn't have any intention of stopping. Strictly speaking, this was his first battle since he came here. He couldn't afford to lose. Under Li Tong's command, even if the sky was completely dark, the attack didn't stop. Everyone used torches to light up the surroundings and continued to attack the city. The battle continued. This battle went on for 3 days and 3 nights without stopping. After 3 consecutive days of attacking the city, there were no victories. Bai Shuang, who was defending the city, lost more than 6,000 Baiman captives in 3 days and 3 nights. Among them, 4,000 were injured and couldn't participate in any battles for a while. On the side attacking the city, Li Tong's army suffered heavier losses. More than 30,000 men were killed or injured. Most of the soldiers were exhausted and their provisions were about to run out. On the 4th day, Chen Dula appeared with a large amount of provisions. These were all gathered from the nearby 30,000 guards and the Songhua River. Considering that he had already collected them once, he naturally encountered a lot of resistance when he collected them this time. In the end, he went from collecting to robbing. With the advantage of 10,000 soldiers, he really managed to get a lot. This could be considered to have completely solved the problem of provisions in the army. Looking at the piles of provisions and the stolen silver, which were like a small mountain, Li Tong finally breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Chen Dula, whose eyes were bloodshot, and said, "General Chen, you've worked hard." Chen Dula smiled bitterly and said, "It doesn't matter if it's a little hard. However, this second collection will cause a lot of damage to the people nearby. I hope this battle will end soon and give them a chance to recuperate." "It definitely will," Li Tong said confidently. Then, he ordered everyone to cook and prepare a full meal for everyone. Then, they would work hard and strive to take down the Jian Province Left Guard tomorrow. On the tower of the Jian Province Left Guard, the siege was still ongoing. From time to time, screams could be heard. Every scream represented the loss of a soldier's life. This made Bai Shuang, who was below the tower, squint his eyes. Of the 18,000 captives, only a fraction was left. From the looks of it, the price they would have to pay tonight would not be small. If that was the case, how many more days would the city be able to hold out was something that no one could be sure of. This time, Bai Shuang had miscalculated. He had overestimated the combat power of the Baiman captives. He thought that with the high walls of the city, there would be no problem at all to defend the city. However, when the battle really started, it was a completely different matter. The military quality was not good, and they did not know how to cooperate. Some of the soldiers were even very timid. When they saw the densely packed siege army below the city, their legs went soft before the battle. All these changes caused them to suffer such a great loss. If the strength of the Baiman army was not average, it would be hard to say if they could achieve a 3-to-1 ratio. Chapter 1153. After 3 days and 3 nights, they had lost more than half of their forces. If this continued, they would probably lose the city in another 3 days and 3 nights. "Commander, why don't we kill our way out? With the advantage of our cavalry, we should be able to catch them off guard and reduce the pressure on the city." Ever since Tong Long had been promoted to battalion commander, his heart was filled with the desire to perform meritorious deeds. He had noticed that Bai Shuang's black cloak, which represented his status as a regiment commander, was very eye-catching. If he wanted to gain merit, he could only perform well on the battlefield. Fighting outside the city was undoubtedly the best opportunity. How could Bai Shuang not know that a cavalry attack could turn the tide of the battle? However, he did not think that the Baiming army, who had suffered a loss once, would be unprepared. Although he could not see anything from the tower, he had a feeling, or perhaps his sixth sense, that the Baiming army was waiting for their cavalry to leave the city. Battalion Commander Tong, there is no need to rush. Before we know the enemy's background, any action outside the city is a risk. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we will not take the risk. Considering that there was no evidence, Bai Shuang did not say it clearly. However, when Tong Long heard these words, his face was filled with displeasure. Commander Bai, you can't be afraid, right? If that is the case, then hand over my 2,500 cavalry, and I will go out to fight. Impudent. Bai Shuang suddenly let out a cold snort, and the aura of his entire body was released, shocking Tong Long on the spot. All along, Bai Shuang had given him the impression that he was very refined, even when he was killing enemies on the battlefield. Perhaps this had something to do with the fact that he had learned from Yang Chendong, but this did not mean that he did not have a temper. When people were chatting in private, they could talk about anything. However, when it came to a battle, when it involved the lives of tens of thousands of people, he could not be careless. Otherwise, not only would he die, he would also let down his teacher, who had valued and nurtured him. There can only be one military order in the army. Tong Long, are you going to disobey a military order? Bai Shuang's aura surged as he asked in a thunderous voice. Tong Long himself was indeed somewhat undisciplined. Otherwise, he wouldn't have led 3,000 cavalrymen out of the city despite Chun Dula's disapproval. In the past, he had not taken Chun Dula seriously because the Tong family was powerful enough in the Jinzhou Left Guard. But now, when he faced Bai Shuang, especially when he shouted at him, he unconsciously became a little timid. When he saw that the other party was angry and reprimanded him with military discipline, he quickly cupped his fists and said, "Your subordinate doesn't dare." The reconnaissance cavalry sent out earlier had already reported the battle situation of the Jinzhou Left Guards. After learning that Commander Bai Shuang had been guarding the city for nearly 4 days, Tian Hu decided to attack immediately. After all, the battlefield was unpredictable, and one mistake could lead to an outcome that no one could predict. Once the Jinzhou Left Guard city was really taken down, the role of the cavalry would be greatly reduced. This was not what Tian Hu wanted to see. The telegram had been sent out. After all, this war involved more than 200,000 people. Even Tian Hu couldn't act on his own. He had to report it to his superior and get permission. Hasn't the telegram been sent back yet? Half an hour had passed, but there was still no news. Tian Hu, who had always been calm, became a little anxious and began to ask for the first time. No. The telegraphist of the 1st Cavalry Division shook his head and continued to stare at the radio station. He didn't dare to miss the slightest movement. Tian Hu frowned slightly. He knew about Yang Chendong's situation. There were 3 radio stations around him, and one of them was a motor that could be manually generated. With these, it was impossible for the radio station to run out of power. Then why didn't he call back after receiving the telegram? According to the rules, the army couldn't act rashly without a reply. But if there was no reply, would they have to wait forever? It was not an exaggeration to say that the Jinzhou Left Guard city was racing against time. One more day meant one more day of danger. Someone sent another telegram to ask. Tian Hu, who was a little anxious, continued to send an order to the telegraphist. What Tian Hu didn't know was that 30 kilometers northeast of them, there was a group of cavalrymen rushing towards them at high speed. From afar, they were all dressed in black clothes, black armor, and black cloaks. Streaks of murderous aura constantly collided with the surrounding air. Only one cavalry unit in the world could carry such a murderous aura and be so well equipped. It was Yang Chendong's Black Cavalry. Just behind these cavalry units, a torrent of bicycles followed. Their speed was not much slower than that of the war horses, and they always maintained a certain distance from the cavalry. If one looked carefully, one would see that these bicyclists were all carrying long objects wrapped in black cloth behind them. What else could they be if they weren't spears? The team was constantly moving forward. Among them, a white horse under a golden cloak was particularly eye-catching. At this moment, beside the white horse, there was also a strong man riding a war horse who was saying something. "Young master, Commander Tion who just sent another telegram, asking for a battle. Do you want to reply?" Haha, this Tion who is good at everything, but recently his murderous aura has been too strong. He needs to calm down. This time, just treat it as a training. Don't worry about it. Let's continue on our way. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon, laughed, then shook his head gently. Obviously, he intended to polish Tion Hu's temper. After all, he would be entrusted with greater responsibilities in the future. It would be bad if he couldn't keep calm when something happened. After talking about Tion Hu, Yang Qindong looked at the dark scene around him and asked in a deep voice, "Beta Persei, how far are we from Tion Hu's division?" "Young master, it's less than 30 miles away. We can arrive in half an hour." Beta Persei replied confidently. Being able to stay by Yang Qindong's side was indeed very impressive, but in reality, the burden was also very heavy. Whether there was something or not, they had to understand it. Very good. Inform the team that there's no need to rush. Try to preserve the team's physical strength as much as possible. This time, we'll test the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division. Yang Qindong smiled. The reason why he didn't reply to the telegram was because he wanted to test them. It was said that the 1st Cavalry Division was very powerful. This time, Yang Qindong wanted to test it himself. The test stone was his own 1,000 Black Knights and the 4th Army Division. The 1,000 Black Knights had just been replenished. Needless to say, those who could join were naturally the strongest. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were the cream of the crop. Who knew how many people their loyalty was? Fortunately, the chief of security, Yang Qindong, had been doing this work. There were many candidates to be tested, so they could finish replenishing the Black Knights in such a short time. They took a boat from Crimson City all the way to Yang Qindong's side. However, such people also had a special characteristic. Perhaps they were indeed capable, but they always had a sense of arrogance. Yang Qindong wanted to use this opportunity to test their strength. At the same time, he wanted to warn them that although the Black Knights were strong, if they didn't work hard, they could be overtaken by others. The 4th Army Division was needless to say. Firearms had a natural advantage over cold weapons. In order to suppress the momentum of the 1st Cavalry Division, Yang Qindong specially allowed the 4th Army Division to participate and asked them to use empty shells. Chapter 1154. Commander Ling Daqiang naturally agreed with this order. Cold Front's reputation had been overshadowed countless times by the world's #1 Cavalry Division. Now that there was such an open and above-board opportunity to take revenge, he naturally wouldn't miss it. In order to achieve the goal of completing the mission, he ordered all the soldiers of the Cold Vanguard to be in their best condition. If anyone dropped the ball, they would be kicked out of the Cold Vanguard. This was no longer just a matter between the 4th Infantry Division and the world's 1st Cavalry Division. It concerned the reputation of the entire Cold Vanguard. Under Yang Qindong's orders, close to 10,000 soldiers quietly arrived. The scouts sent by the 4th Division and the Black Knights were the best scouts. Very quickly, the scouts sent by Tion Hu were eliminated one by one. With the advanced firearms and the speed of the Black Knights, the 1st Cavalry Division was at a disadvantage, at least on the outskirts. Tion Hu was naturally unaware of all this. At this moment, he was still waiting for Yang Qindong's reply. It was almost midnight. Soon, the sun would rise, but there was still no news. Tion Hu was burning with anxiety. Waiting felt like forever. Tion Hu had already drunk at least 5 cups of tea, but there was still no news from the telegraph operator. Just as he was feeling uneasy, the 3rd Regiment commander, Hubo arrived outside the tent and said loudly, "Division Commander, Hubo wishes to see you. Come in." Tion Hu straightened his body and tried his best to hide his anxiety. Then he took out the style of a division leader. Hubo entered the tent and saw that there was only Tion Hu and the telegraph operator. She immediately understood and asked with concern, "Division Commander, Is there still no news from Bugnam of Gojosian? No, there was nothing to hide, so Tion who admitted it. He then looked at Huboer and asked with a smile, "What? Did the 3rd Regiment commander come just to ask about this?" "Of course not. Master, I'm here to report to you that there seems to be something wrong with tonight's situation." Hesitantly, Huboer spoke of her feelings. As a general under the king of the grassland, Huboer did indeed have some ability. Perhaps he was born to fight, but whenever he encountered danger, he would always feel uneasy. This feeling had been proven through countless battles, and it just so happened that tonight, this feeling appeared again. Trusting her sixth sense, Hubao was no longer sleepy. She got out of her tent and found Lu Duo, the commander of the 2nd Regiment, who was in charge of guarding the perimeter. She asked him to ask the scouts if there was anything strange. After completing this task, Hubo couldn't sleep until she got the results. Seeing that Tion who still had some candlelight, she hurried over. "Wrong? What's wrong?" Tion who didn't react until he saw the solemn expression on Hubeur's face. He suddenly stood up and said, "What's wrong? Are you saying that someone will try to harm us tonight?" I don't know." Hubeur shook her head. She didn't dare to make a decision on such an important matter. Instead, she hesitated for a moment before saying, "I think we should wait for news from Commander Lu." Tion, who is usually a careful person. Otherwise, the 1st Cavalry Division wouldn't have achieved such great results under his leadership. However, he couldn't believe that someone would dare to target him. Was it that General Li Tong from Beiming? He should still be attacking the Jinzhou left guard right now. How could he have the time to cause trouble for him? Just as he was in disbelief, footsteps came from outside the door. Then Lu Duo said, "2nd Regiment Commander Lu Duo wants to see Master." "Come in." Tion, who knew that Lu Duo must have brought some news. Moreover, from Lu Duo's somewhat anxious footsteps, Tion, who faintly felt that something was wrong. Lu Duo quickly appeared in front of Tion, who, as expected, his complexion was not good. He first nodded to the 3rd captain, Huboer, who had reported to him. Then, he looked at Tion Hu and said, "Division Master, I just sent someone to contact our scouts. There are more than 10 of them who have yet to contact us." "Which direction?" Tion Hu knew that for the safety of the army, they had to send out close to 100 cavalrymen every night. Now that there were more than 10 cavalrymen who couldn't be contacted, it was very likely that there was a problem in one direction. "Northeast," Lu Duo said in a doubtful tone. It was no wonder that he had such an attitude. The Northeast was already under the control of the 5-star army. There shouldn't be any problems there. Even Tion, who was confused. "Northeast? How is that possible?" As he spoke, he walked over to the map. "Yes, that's the territory of the 5-star army. There shouldn't be any problems there. But it is true that we have lost contact with the scouts there." Lu Duo was the person on duty tonight. He couldn't understand. "Since we have lost contact, we have to be more vigilant." Huboer, who had been the first to report, was still very resolute. "That's right." Tion, who quickly recovered from his shock. He looked at Lu Duo and said, "Regiment Commander Lu, immediately gather the soldiers. Whether or not there really is a problem, we can't take any chances." "Understood." After receiving the order, Lu Duo nodded and agreed. He then turned around and went to carry it out. Even Hubei stepped forward. He wanted to prepare his 3rd Regiment for battle as well. Not even 15 minutes after the 2 regimental commanders left, gunshots rang out from outside the camp. The attack on the 1st Cavalry Division had begun. When Tion, who heard the gunshots, he walked out of the camp and looked towards the northeast in disbelief. How is that possible? They are really attacking us from behind. They even have a large number of firearms. Who are they? With a look of disbelief and doubt on his face, Tion, who got on his horse, and said to Temur, Lu Duo, Huboer, and Gongfeng, "No matter who comes, we can't back down. It's nighttime now, the best time for our 1st Cavalry Division to fight at night. I want everyone to launch a counterattack. If there are too many enemies, retreat before daybreak and regroup with the Saha River Guards." Any questions? No, the 4 regimental commanders replied. Very good. Get ready for battle. Tian Hu said with a solemn expression. Although tonight's opponent had indeed caught him off guard, he was not afraid. On the contrary, he wanted to see what kind of army dared to have designs on the world's #1 cavalry division. A division commander and 4 regimental commanders were about to issue orders to lead the cavalry to launch a counterattack under the cover of the night. However, before they could do anything, a cavalry warrior had already arrived in front of them. Division Commander Wu Nan Wang is here. Prepare for what? Tian Hu was stunned. He thought he had heard wrongly. Division Commander Bugnam of Gojoseon is here. He is personally leading the Black Knights towards us. They're less than 2 miles away. The soldier saw that Tian Hu was still in a daze and repeated himself. This time, Tian Hu heard everything clearly. Then, when he thought of the sneak attack, he came up with an idea. However, this was not the time to think about this. After looking at the faces of the 4 regimental commanders, he said, "Let's go. Let's welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon together." Tian Hu and the others had only walked a few hundred meters when Yang Chendong appeared in front of them with a group of black knights in black clothes, black armor, and black cloaks. Tian Hu and the others immediately dismounted and knelt down to pay their respects. They shouted, "Greetings to Bugnam of Gojoseon." "Aha, sorry to disturb you in the middle of the night. You have worked hard." Bugnam of Gojoseon casually waved his hand and motioned for everyone to get up. The meaning behind this sentence made Tian Hu raise his head again. "Teacher, were you the one who arranged the sneak attack tonight?" "Not bad. You reacted quickly. In fact, your performance was not bad. You were able to gather the troops so quickly. This made the feast that I prepared for you unable to come true." While saying these words, Yang Chendong laughed heartily. Obviously, he was quite satisfied with this result. Yang Chendong was not angry. Tian Hu's heart was at ease. Then, he thought of something and said, "Teacher, do we have any other problems?" There's a problem." At this moment, Yang Chendong's expression became more serious. As I said before, even cavalry scouts need to have 2 groups, one in the open and one in the dark. When necessary, there needs to be a 3rd group to observe everything in the dark. However, you obviously did not do that this time. You only arranged for 1 group of cavalry to be in charge of guarding. This is not good. War is not child's play. Even if the northeast is your rear, you still have to act according to military discipline. By the way, who is in charge of guarding tonight? Bugnam of Gojoseon. It's your subordinate. The 2nd Regiment Commander, Lu Duo, walked out with a red face. "Regiment Commander Lu, you bear a lot of responsibility for tonight's incident. In order to show military discipline, I will deduct half a year of your salary. Do you have any objections? By the way, you have the same leadership responsibility as your division commander. Half a year of your salary will also be deducted." Yang Chendong said in an unquestionable tone, although the 1st Cavalry Division had already done a good job. After all, no one would have thought that there would be a problem in their rear. However, whether or not they had thought of it, a loophole was a loophole. Sometimes a small loophole could put an army in danger. Because of this, Yang Chendong wanted to punish them. Moreover, it would not be too heavy as a warning. Your subordinate accepts the punishment. It was only half a year of salary. The symbolic meaning was more important than the actual meaning. Tian Hu and Lu Duo admitted their mistakes. "Good. Since everyone is awake, then don't sleep anymore. Get ready. We're going to send a gift to the Baiming army." After dealing with the matter in front of him, Yang Chendong's eyes were filled with the aura of an elite. This Li Tong had guts. He actually dared to attack a city that belonged to the 5-star army. If he did not show him how strong the 5-star army was, how could he show the strength of the 5-star army? Chapter 1155. The skies slowly brightened. More and more Baiming soldiers began to gather at the foot of the Jinzhou Left Guard city. Countless scaling ladders were carried into the army. War drums beat and shouts shook the sky. Above the city gate tower, Bai Shuang narrowed his eyes and looked at everything below the city. He could see that the Baiming army's discipline seemed to be much stricter and the morale of the soldiers seemed to have improved a lot. Although he did not know what caused it, he still cautiously said to the soldiers beside him, "Inform everyone that the enemy's attack today will be very fierce. Tell everyone to be in their best condition." Bombing soldiers had eaten their fill last night. Even this morning, there was still shredded meat in the soup. They had never enjoyed such treatment before and were ready to do their best. Chandula did not sleep much last night, so his eyes were still a little red. However, he had to force himself to stay alert. The Jinzhou left guard was his territory. If he could not get it back, it would be a great sin. Even if it was for his own life, he had to fight with all his might. Li Tong, who noticed this scene, looked at Chandula's appearance and laughed. "Don't worry, we have so many soldiers. It's only a matter of time before we take down the Jinzhou left guard. This will still be your territory." It was no wonder that Li Tong was so happy. Once they took down this place, he would have made a great contribution. Not only would he have taken back the city, but he would also have defeated the five-star army. When he reported this to the imperial court, he would have made a great contribution. He would also be the first general to defeat the five-star army on the battlefield. Just thinking about it made him feel good. Yes, General Li is right. We must take down the Jinzhou left guard, Chandula said with a hint of ruthlessness in his voice. Both generals made up their minds, and the general attack began. In order to achieve the goal of taking down the Jinzhou left guard in one battle, they sent out 4 echelons in the first battle, a total of 20,000 soldiers to attack the city. They launched a wave of attacks from the east, south, west, and north. There were only 8,000 soldiers guarding the city, and they were divided into 4 towers. There were only 2,000 soldiers on each tower, and the weakness of the lack of military strength was quickly revealed. After only half an hour of fighting, some bombing soldiers had already rushed up the city walls. Although they were quickly suppressed, the situation was still very dangerous. "Commander, let's switch from cavalry to infantry and reinforce the tower." Tong Long could tell that the situation was not good, so he anxiously suggested to White Shuang. "No, let the cavalry prepare to leave the city for battle." Bai Shuang shook his head. He knew very well that the 2,000 men he brought with him and the 2,500 men under Tong Long's command were all cavalrymen. Asking them to dismount and fight was tantamount to giving up their greatest advantage. It was not worth it. Furthermore, he didn't think that these 4,500 people would be able to turn the tide of the battle. They would only be able to hold on for a little longer. Looking into the distance, Bai Shuang's expression remained calm. However, in his heart, he said anxiously, "Master, why aren't you here yet?" Could it be that the Jinzhou left guard was going to give up just like that? The siege was still ongoing. As if he could see that victory was already decided, Li Tong sent out another 20,000 soldiers, divided into 4 echelons, and continued to increase the number of soldiers, causing the Jinzhou left guard's defense to become shaky. When Chandula saw that the city was about to fall, the trace of worry in his heart finally disappeared. He laughed and said, "General Li is amazing. If this continues, the city will definitely fall today. When the five-star army's reinforcements arrive, we can only leave regretfully." "Ha ha. I hope that the five-star army's reinforcements will arrive. I have arranged a feast for 30,000 soldiers at the back of the army." Li Tong arrogantly snorted and then laughed. "I'm just afraid that some people won't dare to come. Otherwise, I'll let them see how powerful we are." "General Li is wise," Chandula said flatteringly. There were indeed 30,000 bombing soldiers at the back of the army. They had a large number of horse barricades, but because they were well hidden, they couldn't be seen from afar. Among them, there were also many archers and spearmen. They were specifically used to deal with the five-star army's cavalry. As soon as they appeared, they would use bows and arrows to attack from afar. When they got closer, the spearmen would attack. After inflicting heavy damage, they would carry out a large number of horse barricades. At that time, the five-star army's cavalry would be unable to return. This set of tactics was indeed suitable to deal with cavalry. If they weren't prepared, even if the 1st Cavalry Division arrived, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. They might even be heavily injured. However, Li Tong neglected one point. He forgot about Yang Chendong. Against this kind of formation, the cavalry would naturally suffer heavy losses. However, if it was changed to a flintlock attack, it would be completely different. In front of the cold front that could shoot further and aim more accurately, the archers and spearmen were just sending themselves to their deaths. Originally, they had already spread out a large net and were just waiting for the 5-star army's cavalry to appear. However, because of Yang Chendong's appearance and the 4th Lu Division's attack, the situation had changed greatly. The victory had been turned into a defeat. Of course, Li Tong didn't know all of this. If he knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 4th Lu Division would appear here, he wouldn't be so confident. He would have retreated to a nearby city to hide. Many times, war was also about information. The side with more accurate information would have the upper hand and be able to obtain the final victory. Yang Chendong brought the army over. In order to conserve the soldiers' stamina, they didn't rush over very quickly. When they saw the 30,000 Baiming army blocking their path, for hours had already passed since Li Tong gave the order to attack the city. Teacher, it seems like the Jianzhou left guard is in danger. I don't know if Commander Baishuang can hold them off. Why don't I lead the cavalry to charge first? Sensing the intensity of the battle ahead, Division Commander Tian, who volunteered. Don't be in a hurry. You have to believe in Baishuang. He isn't someone who will just sit there and wait for death. Since there aren't any cavalry charging out of the city gates, it shouldn't be the end yet. What we need to do now is to deal a heavy blow to the Baiming army in front of us. Only then will we be able to completely turn the situation around. Yang Chendong's eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. He could immediately tell that the 30,000 Baiming army in front of them were here to block their path. Tian, who naturally didn't dare to question Yang Chendong's orders. He looked at the 30,000 Baiming army in front of him and said with pride, it's only 30,000 Baiming infantry. Although there are a lot of them, they're nothing in front of the 1st Cavalry Division. Teacher, please wait a moment. Let's see how I break through them. As he spoke, Tian, who was about to order the brothers of the 1st Cavalry Division to attack. After all, winning a battle with a small number of people was a common occurrence in their eyes. No. Yang Chendong grabbed Tian, who was about to leave, and said with bright eyes, can't you see that the enemy is full of archers and spearmen? They're all used against cavalry. Also, they're standing so close together. It's obvious that they are hiding something. They might even have something that is used against cavalry. It's not wise to rush out now. After Yang Chendong's analysis, Tian, who didn't act rashly. It wasn't that he hadn't encountered a formation that was used against cavalry before. However, with the bravery of the soldiers and the tip of the arrows, there was nothing that couldn't be broken through. As for the archers' attacks, they were nothing in front of the 1st Cavalry Division, who had a blade and a shield. It was the same for the spearmen. As long as they charged forward fiercely enough, they could completely crush their opponents. Then, it would be time for the autumn wind to sweep away the fallen leaves. However, if the enemy was still hiding some trump cards, then it would be bad. After all, the 1st Cavalry Division's biggest weakness was that they were too few in number. They only had 8,000 men now. Even if they lost 3-1, they couldn't afford to lose so many men. Teacher, there's no hurry. Let the 4th Master Lu take action. They have been holding back for a long time. Moreover, the formation in front of them doesn't have the slightest bit of obstruction. Yang Chendong saw Tian, whose hesitation, and chuckled. Then, he turned to the 4th Master Lu's Ling Daqiang and said, Master Ling, is there any problem with leaving the first battle to you? Other than the 4th Master Lu, the rest were all cavalry. Ling Daqiang originally thought that he wouldn't have anything to do in this battle and was prepared to capture captives. But now that the first battle was going to be handed over to him, how could he possibly decline? Thus, he immediately agreed with a face full of joy. 6th young master, just wait and see. An opponent like this who doesn't even have the slightest bit of resistance is exactly like a meal on a plate for us 4th Master Lu. Ha ha. The spearmen were afraid that the enemy would hide. If there were any obstructions, then it would be depressing. But now, the enemy was on the open ground. They were no different from live targets. As for the archers and spearmen, how could any of them reach them? Good. Then quickly go and prepare. Yang Shandong was also worried that Bai Shuang wouldn't be able to defend the city and would rush out first. If that was the case, then once the Baiming army entered the Jian province left guard, it would take a lot more time and effort to capture him. This wasn't something that he wanted to see. After Ling Daqiang agreed, he went to prepare. The 4th Master Lu was originally part of the Coal Vanguard formation. It was an absolute elite force. After the order was given, the 4 regiments under it spread out and began to charge towards the 30,000 Baiming army, blocking the way. The 30,000 Baiming army was currently gathered together out of boredom. The mission that Li Tong gave them was to stop any cavalry from the 5-star army that wanted to reinforce the Jian province left guard. However, seeing that their attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer, and that the city was about to be taken, there was still no sign of any reinforcements. Many of them began to slack off, thinking that no more enemies would appear. Chapter 11:56. When the 4th Lu Division suddenly appeared in the distance and turned from a small black dot to a large black dot, it also attracted the attention of the soldiers. Some of the Kiliarchs and Centurions also shouted loudly, ordering their soldiers to prepare for battle. That's not right. They aren't cavalry? Some of the sharp-eyed soldiers saw that the enemy wasn't cavalry, as General Li Tong expected. That's right, they aren't cavalry. What's going on? As the distance between the two sides decreased, more and more soldiers voiced out their doubts. Who cares what kind of soldiers they are? If cavalry can't charge over, infantry won't be able to either. Everyone prepare yourselves. Especially the archers. Wait for orders to fire. Although the Baiming general in charge of leading the troops was also curious, he still pretended to be calm due to his duty. As he gave his orders, he also arranged for a soldier to report everything that happened to General Li Tong. In order to reach the goal of quickly engaging the enemy, the soldiers of the 4th Lu Division rode their bicycles and rushed to the battlefield. Only when the distance between the two sides was 3 li did they stop their bicycles and change to running. Then, they rushed towards the Baiming army. They're here. They're so fast. Everyone, prepare for battle. Seeing the speed of the army, the Baiming general in charge of leading the troops had a trace of panic in his eyes. Especially the mounts of the 5-star army. There was something he had never seen or heard of before. People often feared things they didn't know, and this Baiming general was one such person. Among the 30,000 soldiers, 10,000 of them were Baiming archers. They had already received orders to draw their bows and reload them. Once the enemy got close, they would release their arrows and heavily injure the enemy. 1,000 meters, 800 meters, 600 meters, 400 meters, 300 meters. They stopped. The northern Ming soldier who was in charge of observing the distance between the two sides cried out in alarm. He couldn't understand why they suddenly stopped charging. Just as he cried out in alarm, the commander of the 4th Army Division, Ling Daqiang, also gave the order to start shooting. More than 8,095 style guns, which far surpassed that era, spewed out tongues of flame at the same time. One could imagine how magnificent this scene was. With no one able to attack them, the 4th Division was like an aircraft carrier on land, constantly firing bullets as they slowly moved forward. As they continued to advance, one by one, the Baiming soldiers were hit by bullets and fell to the ground. They were like wheat being harvested, unable to struggle at all. This scene caused the 10,000 northern Ming archers to be dumbfounded. Seeing their comrades fall to the ground one after another, and the arrows they shot were simply not enough to cover the distance. In other words, at this moment, they could only passively take a beating without the slightest ability to retaliate. The originally high morale of the soldiers quickly plummeted. No one knew who was the first to be afraid, as he threw down the bow in his hand and turned to flee. This action caused even more archers to abandon their bows and flee. When the situation began to spread, no matter how much the Baiming general shouted, it was no longer of any use. Hold on. Where are the pikemen? If there are any deserters, kill them without mercy. Seeing that the battle formation was about to be destroyed, and it was caused by deserters, the Baiming general's face burned with anger. After the pikemen received the order, Although they were unwilling and did not want to attack their comrades, they could not disobey a military order. They had no choice but to stab forward with the pikes in their hands. In just a few flashes of pikes, more than 1,000 Biming army archers fell, and they finally managed to stop their retreat. Where are the sharpshooters? Do you see that Biming general on the horse? Shoot him down. Ling Daqiang was naturally overjoyed when he saw that the enemy's formation was in chaos after a wave of attacks. However, seeing that the situation was about to be stabilized, how could he be willing to give up? He scanned the surroundings with his binoculars and locked onto the Biming general. There was no lack of sharpshooters in the Cold Vanguard army. They usually had good eyesight and were fed countless bullets. At this moment, when they heard their division commander's order, several sharpshooters searched for the Biming general on the horse. Soon after, they locked onto him, and the sound of gunfire rang out. Bullets whizzed out of the barrels and hit the Biming general's body. The Biming general was still shouting something, trying to turn the situation around. However, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Then another bullet hit him between the eyebrows. At this moment, he lost consciousness and fell from the horse in front of him. With the sudden death of the general, the Biming army, without a unified command, was in complete chaos. Although there were still a few captains who were desperately shouting something, trying to get the position of commander, in this chaotic situation, their shouts were like small boats in the middle of a stormy sea. They were completely useless. After another round of gunfire, the archers of the 4th Division fell to the ground. The situation that had just stabilized was once again thrown into chaos. However, this time, no one gave the pikemen an order, and no one stopped the archers from retreating. Not only that, even the pikemen turned their spearheads and ran away. The army was defeated like a landslide. As the Biming soldiers turned around and fled, many of them even threw their weapons to the ground in order to increase their speed. The situation on the battlefield began to change. As the Biming army frantically retreated, the countless stakes and bags of iron caltrops that were hidden behind them were completely exposed. Division Commander Tian Hu, who was already prepared, used his binoculars to clearly see this scene. He couldn't help but feel that it was a close call. If it wasn't for the 6th young master stopping him, the 1st Cavalry Division would have suffered a great loss. The stakes could affect the speed and offensive power of the cavalry. As for the iron caltrops, it was needless to say. With its 4 sharp points, it was enough to cause heavy damage to the cavalry. How ruthless! Since that's the case, don't blame us for being impolite. Come, all warriors, charge with me. Let's let them know the consequences of facing the wrath of the world's #1 Cavalry Division. Charge! The 8,000 cavalrymen who couldn't wait any longer roared and charged forward. The earth seemed to tremble as dust filled the air. Their momentum was unstoppable. In the middle of the Biming army, the Biming soldier who was sent to deliver a message saw Li Tong and Shendula. He reported the scene he saw. Not cavalry, but infantry? What's going on? Li Tong asked with a face full of surprise. The situation was far beyond his expectations, making Li Tong feel that he couldn't control the situation. We don't know. We only saw that the infantry were extremely fast. They seem to be riding on something that we don't recognize. That thing can increase a person's speed. The soldier who delivered the message tried his best to describe what he saw with words. Riding on something can increase their speed? Li Tong, who was repeating this sentence, suddenly changed his expression. As expected of a general from the capital of Biming, Li Tong's knowledge was far greater than Shendula's. After hearing this, he quickly remembered something, and that was the bicycle. Although the bicycle wasn't produced in the outside world yet, some legends about it had already spread. Li Tong had heard of it before, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. When he thought of the bicycle, Li Tong naturally thought of Bugnam of Gojoseon. It was said that only Bugnam of Gojoseon could command such an army. Could it be him? As the saying goes, a man's name is like a tree's shadow. Although many people thought that Bugnam of Gojoseon was being rebellious by commanding an army, no one dared to underestimate him. However, no one dared to look down on him. On the contrary, they were quite fearful of him. Li Tong was one such person. If it was really Bugnam of Gojoseon who appeared here, Li Tong would have to think carefully. This was an existence that was regarded as a war god. No one had ever taken advantage of him before. How could he resist such a person? Just as Li Tong was struggling in his heart, he suddenly heard a burst of firecracker-like sounds. This sound startled him, and he immediately thought of the Flintlock army. Li Tong, who had a trace of suspicion, was now certain. His originally confident spirit was hit. He almost instinctively shouted, "Oh no, it's Bugnam of Gojoseon. It seemed that we can't take down the Jinzhou left guard. Retreat, prepare to retreat." "Is Bugnam of Gojoseon here?" Chundula, who was on the side, asked as if he hadn't asked the question yet. Then he looked at Li Tong and said, "General Li, we have hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Even if he's here, what's there to be afraid of? We can still fight him." "Fight my ass. Didn't you hear those gunshots? On such an open land, what can we use to fight? Let's retreat." Li Tong was still very self-aware. This was not only because of the fear in his heart. More importantly, he didn't expect Yang Chendong to appear here, so he didn't make any preparations. Under such circumstances, it was obviously unfair to fight with him. As long as the army could be saved, there would be no need to worry about not having a chance to fight in the future. However, if the army was lost, there would be no chance for revenge. Li Tong was the commander. Naturally, no one dared to disobey his order to retreat. Although Chundula looked unwilling, he could only nod and agree in the end. Then, the Biming army that was attacking the city began to retreat step by step. The siege situation also changed because of this. The tower that was about to be breached slowly became quiet. "What's going on?" Tong Long was prepared to fight to the death with the enemy, but the change in front of him made him a little confused. Commander Bai Shuang, who was prepared to fight outside the city, seemed to have thought of something. He then listened carefully and vaguely heard gunshots. He immediately laughed and said, I know, it must be the teacher. Ha, brothers, Bugnam of Gojoseon is here. It's time for us to fight back with all our strength." Chapter 1157. Bai Shuang had studied with Yang Chendong before, so he was quite familiar with the sounds of guns. Adding on the fact that the Biming army suddenly stopped attacking the city, he immediately thought of a certain possibility. When they heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had arrived, the 2,400 cavalry soldiers all began to cheer loudly. From this, it could be seen just how high of a position Yang Chendong held in these soldiers' hearts was. Even Tong Long, who had never seen Yang Chendong before, became extremely excited. During this period of time, he had only heard about Bugnam of Gojoseon, and he was about to come out of his cocoon. Now that he could finally see his face, how could he not be excited? "Let's go, charge out with his commander, and meet up with Bugnam of Gojoseon." Bai Shuang raised his two blades high, shouting loudly in excitement. Following the shout, the city gates opened from the inside, and 4,500 cavalry soldiers charged out like a whirlwind. Speaking of which, it was quite a coincidence. When Bai Shuang and the others charged out, it was precisely when the Biming army was retreating. The 20,000 Biming army that was originally arranged to deal with them had also just cleaned up their things and were retreating. Suddenly, intense battle cries sounded from behind them. When they turned around to take a look, their expressions immediately changed greatly. Li Tong, who had already left the large tent and was leading his soldiers to flee, also saw this scene. He sighed. These 5-star army cavalry were too cunning, actually charging out after he withdrew his defenses. Under this type of timing, even if he gave the order to launch a counterattack now, it was clearly too late. Retreat, retreat, retreat towards the 30,000 guards. Li Tong, who knew that the situation was already in his favor, didn't turn around, instead turning around and fleeing. Behind him was the vast and mighty Biming army. In front of them, who would be afraid of death? That was why at this moment, they actually displayed their life's potential, each one running faster than the other. It was to the extent where not long after, the army responsible for transporting the supplies became the last group. "General, what do we do?" Seeing that there were already no more troops to protect him, The logistics officer in charge of transporting the supplies asked the leading general. Closing his eyes, the general knew that once the provisions were lost, he would be beheaded according to military discipline. But now that he didn't have the ability to protect these provisions, he simply shook his head and said, "Forget it. They were the ones who abandoned us. It's not that we didn't try our best. Tell the brothers, if you want to escape, then run. If you can't escape, then surrender and wait for the 5-star army to come and take over. If we go like this, General, we will die. Why don't we burn the provisions? That way, we'll be able to account for it," the logistics officer suggested. No, the general immediately shook his head. "If we really do that, we will definitely anger the 5-star army. At that time, we won't even have a chance to live. All right, I've made up my mind. If you want to run, then run. If you don't want to run, then stay here with me and wait for the 5-star army to pick us up." Most of the people transporting the provisions were people with average military skills. How could their speed be compared to the speed of war horses? Most of them stay behind. Only a small number of them ran away with the mentality of a fluke. After a stick of incense's time, Commander Bai Shuang brought the cavalry over. Along the way, who knew how many of the Baiming army were killed and how many were captured? When he arrived in front of the transport team and saw that this team of thousands of people was actually waiting for him, he was very curious and came over on his horse. Surrendered General Zhao Xing greets the general. A general wearing a Kiliarka's armor half knelt in front of Bai Shuang. "General Zhao, why didn't you all escape? At the very least, you can burn the provisions. That way, even if you escape, you can account for it to your superiors, right?" Bai Shuang asked with a trace of suspicion. The situation was so abnormal that he had to be careful in case the other party was pretending to surrender. "We can't burn them." Zhao Xing shook his head and said, "With these provisions, countless people can eat and many people can survive. If we burn them, then the only ones who will suffer will be the soldiers and civilians who have no food to eat. Zhao Xing can't do something that would incur the wrath of the heavens and people just to avoid a punishment." Oh, who would have thought that a mere chiliarch in charge of escorting grain would have such knowledge? This was beyond White Shuang's expectations. He carefully sized up Zhao Xing's appearance again and memorized it in his heart. Then he took out a token from his bosom and said, "This is my position token. Take this back to Jian Province's left guard city. If anyone asks you about the provisions, you can show this token. Do you have any questions?" After taking the token, Zhao Xing nodded solemnly. "General Bai, don't worry. I know what to do." "Good. We still have to chase after the enemy. You can go about your business." After he finished speaking, Bai Shuang spurred his horse and continued to chase after the Baiming army. He didn't turn back to look at Zhao Xing, as if nothing had happened. When the group was far away, Tong Long, who was following in the group, asked Bai Shuang with a puzzled expression, "Commander, do you really believe that Zhao Xing won't escape and will deliver the provisions to the city?" "I'll take a gamble. Also, teacher is here. This area will belong to the 5-star army. He won't be able to escape even if he wants to." Bai Shuang chuckled and continued to spur his horse forward. He did have the intention to test Zhao Xing. If this person really delivered the provisions to Jian Province's left guard city, then he would report this matter to Yang Chendong. This person might be a talent. On the other hand, if this person escaped, then he would also report this matter to Yang Chendong. Anyone who dared to deceive the 5-star army should be prepared for revenge. This was just a small interlude. It wouldn't affect the overall situation. Bai Shuang led thousands of cavalry and chased after them. Although they didn't catch up with Li Tong and Chandula, they still caught up with many of the Baiming army that had fallen behind. In the end, they brought back 5,000 captives. In this battle, the Baiming army retreated without a fight. They lost a total of 40,000 men. 7,000 of them died in battle. The rest were all captives. When Bai Shuang brought the 5,000 captives back to the Jian Province's left guard city, Yang Chendong had already entered the city and was listening to reports from all sides. When Bai Shuang and Tong Long appeared in the main hall of the residence, Yang Chendong's loud laughter rang out. "Bai Shuang, it has been hard on you this time. You deserve the most credit for being able to destroy the enemy. Teacher Xia, this is what Bai Shuang should do. By the way, teacher, this person is Tong Long. He made a great contribution by defeating the Jian province's left guard city without shedding a drop of blood. Bai Shuang took this opportunity to recommend Tong Long. This was the first time Tong Long met Yang Qindong. Although he was older, for some reason, when he saw Yang Qindong, he was shocked by the powerful aura emitted by him. He couldn't help but kneel on the ground. This general, Tong Long, greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. May you live 1,000 years. Haha, there's no need for that. We can talk casually. Yang Qindong chuckled. Then he sized up Tong Long. He found that this person was not only handsome, but also extraordinary. He was very happy. After considering that the other party had made a great contribution, he said, Tong Long, this king wants to establish a reinforced cavalry regiment of Liaodong. How about you be the first commander? By the way, this is a cavalry unit of 5,000 people. Do you have the confidence to lead them well? Tong Long had just been promoted to battalion commander. It was only because of the war situation that he was able to lead 2,500 men. Once the situation returned to normal, he could only lead 400 men. Now that the number had suddenly increased by more than 10 times, how could he not be excited and grateful? What are you waiting for? Quickly thank Bugnam of Gojoseon. Seeing that Tong Long was a little dumbfounded, Bai Shuang immediately reminded him. Oh, this subordinate thanks Bugnam of Gojoseon for promoting me. I will definitely be a good commander and create a strong army. I will not disappoint Bugnam of Gojoseon. Ha, good. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. Baiming has the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. My 5-star army also has the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment. When the time comes, we will see who is more powerful. Right now, this unit is still lacking some core strength. Do you have any talents that you can recommend? Yang Qindong asked with a smile. A cavalry unit of 5,000 people was only a regiment. It could be seen how much importance Yang Qindong placed on this unit. If this kind of unit was only given to Tong Long, no one would be at ease. The others had to be personally appointed by Yang Qindong in order to ensure the loyalty of the unit. Everyone was clear about this point. Immediately, everyone suggested some candidates. Soon, there were suitable candidates for the 12 battalion commanders of the Liaodong Iron Cavalry Regiment. Next was the vice commander. Regarding this problem, no one had any good opinions. First, we have to look at the responsibilities of the vice commander. According to the rules of the 5-star army, the vice commander was to assist the commander in managing the entire unit. Only when the commander was not around would the vice commander have the right to make decisions. Normally, the vice commander would be in charge of logistics. Only with good service would the unit be able to win more battles. Considering that the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment was a reinforced unit, there would be many difficult missions in the future. This vice commander would not only be able to manage logistics, it would be best if he could also fight well. This kind of talent was naturally hard to find. Everyone looked at each other and couldn't find a suitable candidate. Although there were vice commanders in each division, no one wanted to recommend their vice commander. After all, it wasn't a promotion, it was just a transfer. Looking at the current Liaodong Iron Cavalry Regiment, it was likely that the vice commander wouldn't even be considered a transfer. No one had a good candidate. Yang Qindong asked with a calm expression, What? Is no one willing to give up? Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to be a little unhappy, everyone was a little anxious at the moment. They were wondering if they should recommend someone from their own army's deputy commander. But before they could say anything, Commander Bai Shuang suddenly thought of someone and said, Teacher, I have a suitable candidate. It's just that I don't know much about him. Why do I need teacher to look at him? Chapter 1158. Suitable, but not understanding. This sentence itself was somewhat contradictory. Bai Shuang's words also attracted everyone's attention. Considering that he didn't make it clear, Bai Shuang smiled bitterly and explained in detail how he met Zhao Xing on the way. Zhao Xing? I know this person. He escorted the provisions to Jianzhou's Zhuowei city. Because it was related to logistics, I went to take a look. I still have a deep impression of this person, Beta Persei, who was standing beside Yang Chendong, said after Bai Shuang finished speaking. Did he really escort the provisions back? Bai Shuang's eyes flashed as he asked. That's right. Beta Persei chuckled and continued. Not only did he transport the provisions back, but he also brought 2,108 surrendered soldiers. According to him, he had a total of 2,200 soldiers. 92 of them escaped for some reason, and most of them came with him to surrender. Oh, by the way, when I went, his soldiers were lined up neatly. Even the weapons in their hand were placed neatly together. To be honest, it's the first time I've seen someone surrender like this. The other officers couldn't help but nod in agreement. It wasn't that he hadn't seen people surrender before, but most of them were disheveled and dispirited, looking as if they had lost all hope in life. Their weapons were thrown everywhere, so he had never seen such a carefree and effortless surrender before. Hearing this, even Yang Chendong couldn't help but be curious. There's such a wonderful person. Come, bring him here so I can see him. I'll go. Beta Persei agreed. I'll go with second brother. Bai Shuang thought for a moment and stepped forward. He thought highly of Zhao Xing. Since his teacher wanted to see him, he wanted to say a few words to remind him. The two walked out of the main hall together. Yang Chendong looked at the people who stayed behind, and his gaze fell on the face of the 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Tian Hu. Commander Tian, how do you feel about this battle? Awesome, Tian Hu said without thinking. In this battle, the 4 regiments of cavalry had killed and captured twice the number of enemies. Most importantly, there were almost no heavy casualties on their side. The number of dead and injured did not exceed 100. This kind of difference in casualties greatly comforted him. However, he immediately recalled that they had almost been ambushed. Thinking about how the dozen or so cavalry scouts had been surrounded by the 4th Division and the Black Knights, and how not a single one had managed to escape, his old face turned red again. Tian Hu's face suddenly turned red, which made Yang Chendong swallow back the words he wanted to say. Sometimes, it was okay to give a little pressure, but if the pressure was too much, it was very likely that it would be unable to bear the burden and eventually collapse. The 1st Cavalry Division was his weapon. Naturally, he didn't want anything to happen to it. This time, Yang Chendong called out Tian Hu's name, not to remind him of anything, but to consider the current situation. He wanted to expand the size of the 1st Cavalry Division. On the grasslands, there was a very powerful Baiming army called the Liaodong Cavalry. It was said that their strength was extraordinary, and they had a large number of people. They had already expanded from 50,000 to 70,000. Faced with the cavalry elites who came and went like the wind, firearms could only be used to defend, but not to attack. Yang Chendong set his sights on the 1st Cavalry Division. Cavalry against cavalry, speed against speed. Even if they couldn't win, they could at least suppress the threat they brought to him. Looking at the 1st Cavalry Division, they indeed had the qualifications and strength to fight against any opponent. The only thing they lacked was the number of soldiers, only 10,000. Against an enemy 7 times their number, even if they were powerful, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Therefore, expanding the number of soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division became an inevitable matter. Originally, Yang Chendong wanted to expand the division into an army. However, considering that there was no suitable source of soldiers, it was very likely that this would reduce their combat strength. Therefore, he thought about expanding the division on a small scale first. For example, each regiment would be expanded from 2,000 to 4,000 people. This way, it wouldn't reduce their combat strength too much, and it would also increase the number of people, which would be more useful at critical times. With this thought in mind, Yang Chendong looked at Tian Hu and took the initiative to suggest, Commander Tian, if you were to choose these captives first, do you have the confidence to double the current number of soldiers without affecting your own combat strength? Tian Hu was already prepared to be reprimanded by Yang Chendong. After all, he was careless in the first place. He only arranged for sentries to scout the cavalry and didn't arrange for hidden sentries. Fortunately, It was Yang Qindong who came to test him this time. If it was really the enemy, the consequences would be unimaginable. If he made a mistake, he would be punished with a plank. Tian, who didn't become arrogant because of his military exploits. He didn't expect that Yang Qindong didn't want to talk about this. Instead, he wanted to expand the division. Tian, whose eyes immediately lit up. As the opponents became stronger and stronger, especially powerful forces like Baiming, which could easily take out millions of soldiers, he felt that the lack of military strength had become the biggest obstacle restricting his performance. He wanted to raise this request to Yang Qindong not too long ago. However, considering that the 1st Cavalry Division's equipment was excellent and the intensity of their training was high, once they expanded, he was afraid that he would have to pay a large sum of money every month. Over the years, he had accumulated a lot of money. This was a matter of great importance. Tian, who suppressed his thoughts and didn't mention it. He didn't expect that Yang Qindong would take the initiative to mention it. How could he miss such an opportunity? He immediately stepped out of the formation and said, "Teacher, this student has already thought about this problem. As long as we carefully select and cooperate with the new veterans, our combat strength shouldn't decrease. In fact, it can definitely be improved. After all, with more soldiers, their momentum would be stronger. The deterrence and attack power to the enemy would also be greater. Well, since you're so confident, then it's settled. At the very least, how many people should we expand? It would be best if we could double the current strength. Of course, if we really don't have that many suitable soldiers, we can't force it. This time, what we want is a strong army, not quantity. As for how much money you need, you can tell Beta Persei later and ask him to give it to you." Yang Qindong wanted Tian who to say this. If the executor was so confident, what else did he have to worry about? This time, he decided to increase the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division because he was very satisfied with the other party's performance. His actions of probing further confirmed his thoughts. Such an army should be larger in number so that they could better display their strength. As for the problem of money, it really wasn't too big of a problem. Not to mention anything else, the gold and silver mines discovered in the Japanese Empire were enough to solve the current financial pressure on Yangtze. Not to mention, many of the powers in Southeast Asia were now under the Yang faction, allowing them to sell more of their products. There were also many non-core items that were directly exported to other continents through the sea, bringing in countless silver taels. Whether it was an army, a force, or a country, nothing could be done without money. Yang Qindong, who had known this for a long time, had never slacked off in this aspect. Now, it seemed that the effect was very significant. This was also the foundation that allowed him to conquer the world and where his confidence lay. "Thank you, teacher. This student will do in a while," Tian, who said excitedly. If it weren't for the fact that Yang Qindong was presiding over the meeting, he was afraid that he would have already gone to deal with this matter. As he spoke, the sound of footsteps came from outside the hall. Beta Persei, Bai Shuang, and Zhao Xing walked into the hall. Then, the two in front saluted and stood at attention. Only Zhao Xing knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live Yang Qindong. You may rise." Yang Qindong looked at Zhao Xing, who was now 7 feet tall, and said indifferently, "Thank you, Bugnam of Gojoseon." Zhao Xing said as he stood up and slowly raised his head. Yang Qindong's appearance reflected in his eyes. "I've heard about your matter. Since you're willing to submit to the 5-star army, this king naturally welcomes you. The provisions were escorted by you, but how do you want to deal with them?" Zhao Xing spoke slowly, as if he was asking for advice, but also as if he was testing him. "Me?" Zhao Xing stretched out his right index finger and pointed at himself, then asked carefully, "I'm just a surrendered general. How can I have the right to discuss such matters?" "Hey, just say it." Bai Shuang could tell that the teacher was testing the waters, so she reminded him softly from aside. Zhao Xing had a good impression of Bai Shuang. Just like on the way here, this person had reminded him a lot. For example, he shouldn't be too afraid when he saw Bugnam of Gojoseon. On the contrary, if there was a chance, he should express his thoughts. Only by leaving a deep impression would he be put in an important position. Now that Bai Shuang had reminded him, Zhao Xing decided to voice his thoughts. He opened his mouth and said, Bugnam of Gojoseon has given this surrendered general a chance. Then this surrendered general will explain it to you. These provisions were snatched by Chundula through the second round of rations. In the process, he even accidentally killed some people, causing the surrounding people to complain. If it's possible, can you give some of these provisions to the people? To be honest, their lives are too hard. This is a bitter cold land, and the winter is very long. As a result, the crops grow very slowly. In order to get these provisions, they have to pay a lot more than others. Zhao Xing explained some of the things he knew in great detail. He was originally a child of the Baiming army. From the moment he was born, his fate could not be changed. However, he was not a person who accepted his fate. Instead, after knowing that everything was irreversible, he actively faced it. He had practiced martial arts since he was young, regardless of whether it was summer or winter. When he had time, he would go to the nearby private schools to listen to the teachers' lectures. Chapter 1159. Under the guidance of a teacher whose interest was the best, he learned many things and understood some of the principles of life. Relying on his own efforts, he became 1,000 captains. With a high position, he was able to see more of the hardships of the commoners. However, as a lowly person, his words carried little weight, and he did not know what he could do. This time, when the Emperor of Baiming sent out troops to aid Liang, Zhao Xing, who had no backing, became a member of this difficult task. Originally, he wanted to fight for a chance to perform, but he did not expect Li Tong to value him and let him become 1,000 captains. It was because of this that he saw more of the dark side. When he saw that the food was stolen from the commoners, and that the commoners did not know how to survive this winter, he would secretly cry while eating. Now that he had the chance to express his views in front of Bugnam of Gojoseon, who loved the commoners like his own children, how could he let go of such an opportunity? Then he explained everything in detail. When he spoke about the depths of his emotions, he even shed tears. Influenced by Zhao Xing, some of the officers in the other halls also involuntarily shed tears. Many of them had experienced hardships, and listening to these words, they seemed to be pulled back to the past. Only Yang Qindong sat there expressionlessly, not affected in the slightest. This was not to say that his heart was hard, but because he had seen too much, he had long become numb. If he cried whenever something happened, how could he have everything he had now? A strong person must have a strong heart. Rather than crying whenever something happened, it was better to think of a way to change everything. This was what a leader should do. Zhao Xing, who stood there, spoke for the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn. Only when he was almost done did he realize that this was not his own military camp, but Bugnam of Gojoseon's discussion hall. He immediately shut his mouth, and then with a look of begging for forgiveness, he once again knelt on the ground. Only after Zhao Xing finished speaking did everyone regain their senses. Then, their gazes landed on Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the table. The main hall once again quieted down, and Yang Qindong's voice resounded in everyone's ears. The common people live in poverty, and this is the incompetence of the great Ming dynasty's government. That's why we have to change everything. Since they can't do it, then let's find someone who can. I believe this will be a blessing for the people. Bugnam of Gojoseon is wise. The generals replied in unison. Yang Qindong raised his hands and pressed them down. With just this movement, the main hall returned to silence. Then he looked at Zhao Xing, who was kneeling on the ground, and said, "The people are indeed suffering, but there isn't much food in the army either. If we want to fight, we need to maintain sufficient physical strength and nutrition. Therefore, it's better to provide these rations to the soldiers first." When Yang Qindong said this, it was equivalent to making a decision. Naturally, the others did not have any objections. Even if they did, they would only report it to Yang Qindong in private. However, Zhao Xing did not know about this rule. He thought that his words had already convinced Bugnam of Gojoseon, or at least the other generals. He did not expect this to be the result. Thus, he said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, can't you give a portion of the food to the common people?" At least let them survive this year's cold winter. Are you doubting this king's decision? Yang Qindong, who had a calm expression a moment ago, suddenly changed his expression. A powerful pressure involuntarily landed on Zhao Xing's body. Zhao Xing, who originally wanted to say something, was suppressed by this pressure. His face instantly flushed red, and the feeling of being stared at by a wild beast made it difficult for him to even breathe. What Yang Qindong used was a visual attack that was close to the Grandmaster level. Under this aura, unless one had a firm belief, not many people could withstand it. Being targeted, Zhao Xing's expression was extremely ugly. He was using all his strength to resist all of this. Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to be burning with anger, for some reason, the fear in his heart became weaker and weaker. At this moment, his mind was filled with the suffering of the common people after they did not have food to eat, and even death. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became. Zhao Xing knew that if he did not say these words today, he would not have the chance to say them in the future. Then, he did not know where he got the strength from, but he actually broke through the layers of pressure from the visual attack. He forced himself to raise his head and said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, everyone says that you love the common people like your own children. Please make a decision for the common people of Liaodong. I, Zhao Xing, thank you on behalf of them." When he finished speaking, thump, thump, Zhao Xing kowtowed nonstop. Even when blood flowed from his forehead, he still had no intention of stopping. "Zhao Xing, what are you doing? Hurry up and stop." Seeing that Zhao Xing was actually using this to threaten his teacher, Bai Shuang was so scared that his face turned pale. He reached out to stop Zhao Xing. "Commander Bai, thank you for your kindness. I have made up my mind. If Bugnam of Gojoseon does not agree, I will kowtow until I die here." Zhao Xing's eyes were filled with determination. He had worked hard since he was young, but other than the title of Qianhu, it could be said that he had achieved nothing. Now that he had become a surrendered general, he was afraid that he would lose the title of Qianhu in the future. If that was the case, what was the meaning of life? He might as well take advantage of this opportunity to stand up for the common people. Even if he died, it could be considered as having been born into this world. At this moment, Zhao Xing was going all out against Yang Qindong. The other officers were shocked. They had never seen anyone who dared to treat Yang Qindong with such an attitude. They could even imagine the consequences that Zhao Xing would have to face. Admittedly, Zhao Xing's words were indeed moving, and it could be seen that he was a general who truly cared for the people. However, the words of a lowly person did not carry much weight. Furthermore, Yang Qindong was not wrong. Before the large amounts of supplies were sent up, the army needed food, especially now that there were tens of thousands of captives. These people needed food the moment they opened their mouths. If they were not appeased, it would be hard to avoid big problems. Everyone had their own reasons, so no one else could say anything. They could only wait for Yang Qindong to make a decision. Zhao Xing was also a man of few words. After saying these words, he closed his eyes, looking like he could do whatever he wanted. The atmosphere in the main hall became very tense because of this. Everyone's heartbeats could be faintly heard. On the main seat, Yang Qindong had already retracted his aura. He did not expect Zhao Xing to be able to break through his eye attack. From this, it could be seen that this person was indeed a talent. Those words came from the bottom of his heart. If he was not prepared to die, he would not be able to do this. It was rare to have someone who loved the people so much. Yang Qindong had a good impression of him. After all, not everyone who cared about the people could face death with equanimity. Of course, he had to use such a talent for himself. Just as everyone was waiting for Yang Qindong to announce the result, he said, "Order, promote Zhao Xing to be the deputy commander of the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment. He is to assist Tong Long in the preparation and training of the army. Order the other divisions to prepare for the army's departure in 3 days." The sudden order confused everyone, especially Zhao Xing, whose mind was filled with questions. Not only was he not killed, he was promoted instead. What was going on? He was completely confused. However, he still remembered one thing. What about the food for the people during winter? Thinking of this, it directly asked, Bugnam of Gojosian food. At this time, Zhao Xing did not show any excitement because he was promoted. Instead, he was still concerned about the food problem of the people. Yang Shandong was very impressed. The food problem is easy to solve. For this year and next year, I will not collect any agricultural tax from the people of Liaodong, which is the 3 eastern provinces. The food collected can be used for our own use. There won't be any problems, right? The reason why he was worried that the people of the 3 eastern provinces would not have any food to survive the winter was that Bugnam of Gojosian would send people to collect food at the end of autumn. If the food tax was removed, the harvest this year would be enough for the new year, and they would be much richer. At this moment, Zhao Xing finally understood that it was not that Bugnam of Gojosian did not hear what he said. He was just testing him. Thinking of how the people of the 3 eastern provinces would not starve to death if the agricultural tax was not collected for 2 years, Zhao Xing did not know how many lives this would save. He immediately fell to the ground again and shouted, "Long live Bugnam of Gojosian! All right, you are thinking for the people. How can I not fulfill your wish? They will be my people in the future. Of course, I will not watch them starve. This matter will be announced in a while. There is no need to mention it. Now, you only have 5 days to prepare the army. We can't wait any longer at the beginning city." When he said this, Yang Chendong's eyes had a hint of seriousness. "Sixth young master, don't we have to fight Li Tong and the others? Will they come to find trouble with us because of this?" Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 4th Army Division, asked worriedly when he heard that they were going to enter the grasslands. "That's why we have to leave some people behind to watch them." Why did the 4th Army Division stay behind? You also know that although we have opened up a supply route to the beginning city, it is not very safe. Therefore, we need someone to stay behind to continue suppressing the Baiming army. This task belongs to the 4th Army Division. Yang Qindong said with a look as if he had long prepared for this. When Ling Daqiang heard this, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Sixth young master, we, the 4th Army Division, will carry out your decision." This was not because Ling Daqiang raised a question, so Yang Qindong arranged for them to stay behind. It was because he already had this idea. In comparison, although the 4th Army Division had bicycles in their hands and could increase their speed, the journey was too long. By the time they arrived, their legs would not listen to them. It would be easier for the cavalry to travel. Besides, they would only be defending and not attacking. The 4th Army Division, who were all firearms, would be of great use. Chapter 1160. Of course, Yang Qindong wouldn't just leave the 4th Division behind. What if the Baiming army went around them? Therefore, he also left behind the new army that was rushing towards the Jinzhou left guard. That was more than 20,000 cavalry. If they stayed behind to cooperate with the 4th Division, they would be able to ensure the safety of the 3 eastern provinces. As for the next step, they would need to wait for the army from the Japanese Empire and the 7th Army there to arrive in the 3 eastern provinces. Only then would they be able to hand over the defense and head to the grasslands. Leaving behind the 4th Division and the new army, Yang Qindong would bring the 1st Cavalry Division and the Liaodong Cavalry Strengthening Regiment to support the first city. Although there weren't many troops, they were all cavalry. They were elite enough to guarantee that they could reach the grasslands in the shortest time possible. Considering the urgency of time, they only had 5 days to prepare. After 5 days, the new army would arrive at the Jinzhou left guard. That was also the time when Yang Qindong would leave with his troops. Overall, it was still quite tense. Fortunately, he could train as he hurried along, saving some time. After the order was given, the various divisions started to get busy, especially the 1st Cavalry Division and the newly established Liaodong Cavalry Strengthening Regiment that needed to be doubled. There's a lot of work to be done to expand and build one. Fortunately, with the help of the 4th Division and the Black Cavalry, although time was tight, it wasn't impossible. The biggest advantage of the 5-star army was that they didn't have to worry about food and weapons. In other words, once the new army was organized, they could immediately start training. This was something that other armies couldn't compare to. At the same time as the expansion of the army, the news that Bugnam of Gojoseon had ordered the 3 eastern provinces to be exempted from agricultural taxes was also announced to the world. After the news spread out, the people of Liaodong rushed to spread the news and were overjoyed. Although the 3 eastern provinces were bitter and cold, they had a large territory, especially the black soil that was given to them by the heavens. It was quite fertile. Although they only had 1 season a year, the yield was not low. Moreover, because of the quality of the soil, the crops they planted were very plump. If it wasn't for the fact that they had to feed the hundreds of thousands of Liaodong army, the standard of living here would be quite good. At least, there wouldn't be any cases of people freezing to death. Since the establishment of the Great Ming Dynasty, Liaodong, which was the early Newer Gandusi region, was not very important, which was why the people here had always been poor. Now that Yang Shindong had suddenly changed their lives, the people of Bugnam of Gojoseon, Liaodong region, Liaodong's reputation. After the good policy was sent to Lu Ji, the governor of the 3 eastern provinces in Terran City, he and General Yi Ligong discussed and immediately launched a conscription. They preached to the people that if they wanted to ensure the existence of a good policy, they had to ensure the existence of Bugnam of Gojoseon's regime. This required everyone to contribute to protect him. With good publicity and the fact that Lu Ji still had a lot of money and food left behind by Yang Shindong, the expansion plan of the 3 eastern provinces was quickly implemented. When the source of soldiers was no longer a problem, General Yi Ligong also improved the quality of the soldiers. The 3 eastern provinces were now thriving. With money came soldiers. It didn't take long for Yi Ligong to take over the defense of the 4th Division and the new army. These 2 armies were also able to withdraw. On the morning of the 2nd day after the change of defense, these 2 armies escorted the food and went straight to the direction of the first city. 30,000 guards. It was just a small town where Qianhu was located. It could be described as a small town. At this moment, it was already overcrowded and very noisy. Li Tong's army had been defeated and had come here. Along with him were 140,000 defeated soldiers. Originally, he was prepared to go with Chun Dula to the Jian Province Guard or the Shenyang Central Guard. Those were all big cities, so it was naturally easier to arrange for soldiers like them. What he didn't expect was that these 2 cities rejected him because of the lack of food. To put it bluntly, these people just wanted Li Tong to become the first line of defense for the 5-star army's attack, so that they could protect their safety. Even though Li Tong and Chun Dula were clear about this, they were somewhat helpless. It was because Li Tong had received the imperial order to deal with the 5-star army. Now that the 2 cities had rejected him in this name, he really had no other choice. Staying in the 30,000 guards, seeing the food decrease day by day, the morale of the soldiers also decreased day by day. Li Tong was very worried that Bugnam of Gojoseon would suddenly lead the army to attack. If that was the case, the small 30,000 guards wouldn't be able to defend at all. In order to prevent the worst situation from happening, Li Tong sent out large amounts of scouts to keep a close eye on the Jian Province left guard's every move, so that when true danger arrived, he could immediately lead the army to react. As for whether he would fight or run at that time, he himself didn't know either. As far as Li Tong was concerned, every day passed in torment, to the extent where he couldn't even go out to face the soldiers in the city. All of this was because the provisions promised by the Beiming imperial court still hadn't arrived. Back when he was leading the troops, Li Tong had already been worried about the issue of provisions. And because of this, he even brought up this issue in the imperial court. He never expected to provoke public anger, to the extent where when he set out, the conclusion given by the higher-ups was that he had to raise his own provisions after arriving in the Liaodong region. When the time came, the various guards in Liaodong region would support him greatly. But now, most of the Liaodong region had already been occupied by the 5-star army, and the original capital of Liaodong region, Terran City, was also owned by Bugnam of Gojoseon. It was already impossible to raise provisions here. After reporting everything that happened here to the imperial court, Li Tong was like a criminal waiting for the verdict to come out. If the provisions were insufficient, how could the army fight? Could it be that they had to fight on an empty stomach? It was said that the emperor didn't lack hungry soldiers. At this moment, not only did Li Tong scold those civil officials in the imperial court, but he also scolded Daizong Zhu Qiyu in his heart. Since you don't give me any provisions, I'll just retreat when the 5-star army arrives. After waiting for 4 days, there was still no movement. Even the surrounding city guards didn't provide any support. Li Tong said hatefully in his heart. Just as he was scolding everyone in his heart, there were hurried footsteps outside the courtyard. Then, Chindula appeared in front of him and said, "General Li, the 5-star army has left the city." "What? Don't tell me they're coming here? If that's the case, we have to leave quickly. Most of the 5-star army is cavalry, and they're extremely fast." When Li Tong heard this, he said with a panicked expression. Chindula saw the reaction and felt disdain for him. With this little bit of courage, he wanted to deal with the 5-star army and Bugnam of Gojoseon. He didn't know what the imperial court was thinking, sending such a cowardly general. Chindula looked down on Li Tong in his heart, but when he considered that the other party had an army of 140,000 soldiers, even if he was dissatisfied, he wouldn't show it. He acted as if he didn't hear Li Tong's words and said, "Good news. Although the 5-star army has left the city, they didn't come here. Instead, they went straight to the west. It seems like they're preparing to pass through here and go to the grasslands. Hehe, Origin City is now surrounded by Biming and the world of Wara. I'm afraid they'll want to help us out." "Really?" While digesting this news, Li Tong asked very carefully, "They won't suddenly take a detour and come to our 30,000 soldiers, right?" "No, they won't. Even if it's true, I've already arranged for hundreds of scouts to keep an eye on them. If there's a change in the situation, we'll immediately receive the news." Chindula shook his head. "Good, that's good. We'll be safe now that the main force of the 5-star army has left," Li Tong said with a sigh of relief. Seeing that Li Tong only had such a small thought, Chindula shook his head lightly. In his eyes, this wasn't a matter of whether he was safe or not, but an opportunity to take back everything. No matter what, he was still the commander of the Jian Province Left Guard. Now that the city was gone, his position as commander existed in name only. If he wanted to seize power again, he had to take back the city. All of this could only be done by relying on Li Tong. "General Li, you see, the 5-star army has left. Even Bugnam of Gojoseon has left with the troops. Should we also take action?" Chindula asked tentatively. "Take action? What action? Are we going to stop Bugnam of Gojoseon from leaving? Don't joke around. We can't defeat them." Li Tong shook his head. He wasn't stupid enough to throw away his life. No, generally misunderstood. I'm saying that since Bugnam of Gojoseon has left, the Jian Province Left Guard must be defenseless. This is the best opportunity for us to take back the city. Once we succeed, General Li will have made a great contribution. If the Emperor knows, he will also reward you." Chindula moved forward and instigated. "Reward?" Li Tong's expression changed when he heard this. If a general didn't want to make a contribution, then he definitely wasn't a good general. He was indeed tempted. However, when he thought about the fact that the army was almost out of food, how could such an army win a battle? He immediately shook his head and replied, "No, we're currently lacking in food. It's fine if we don't fight. We won't starve to death even if we eat 1 meal a day. However, if we fight a war, how can we do it without sufficient physical strength?" This, Chindula, who wanted to take back the Jian Province Left Guard, rolled his eyes. In the end, in order to achieve his goal, he said fiercely, "It doesn't matter, General Li. As long as you agree to send troops, I'll take care of the food issue. I can borrow some from the Jian Province Left Guard and Shenyang Central Guard. I think with my old face, I can at least find some." Chindula was putting a lot of effort. Li Tong was displeased when he heard this. Previously, no matter how he begged him to get some food, he couldn't do it. Now, in order to take back the Jian Province Left Guard, there was a way. This was just a selfish person. Chapter 1161. Li Tong wanted to say that food was not enough, but considering that he also needed to make a contribution, it was better not to fall out with Chindula, so he nodded. "Okay, As long as we have food, we can send troops to the Jinzhou left guard. No matter what, we have to help General Chen take back the territory. Chen Dula knew very well that Li Tong was not doing this to help him, but to make a contribution. However, the two of them now had the same request, so it was not the time to undermine him. He nodded and said, "Okay, leave it to me." Speaking of which, Chen Dula was indeed quite capable. With his old face, he managed to borrow enough food to last his army for 20 days from the nearby guard station. With this time, in his view, it was not a problem to take down the Jinzhou left guard. As for how to solve the problem of food at that time, he just needed to collect the food tax from the nearby people. In order to not be punished, Chen Dula had long forgotten about the suffering of the people. Baiming capital, Yamen of the Ministry of Revenue. The Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Secretary and Minister Justice, Su Yozhen, walked in steady steps. The officials of the Ministry of Revenue hurriedly came out to greet him. Soon, the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, also came out in a neat official uniform. "Oh, I don't know. Lord Su, please forgive me for not going out to meet you." "Ha. Lord Jin is too polite." Su Yozhen smiled and laughed. The two ministers walked into the Yamen of the Ministry of Revenue together. As they walked, Jin Lian asked with confusion, "Lord Su, why have you come to the Ministry of Revenue?" "Oh, it's because of the war in Liaodong. Li Tong lost his food, and now hundreds of thousands of soldiers don't even have food to eat. This is not good. How can they win the war? That's why I'm here to see if I can send them some rations as soon as possible," Su Yozhen said with a compassionate expression. As the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian was naturally very clear about Li Tong's request for food. He had asked the emperor about this, and the answer he received was that he needed to provide for the grassland war first. If there was anything else, he could just support Li Tong. In this regard, Jin Lian fully understood the emperor's intention. This was also the reason why Li Tong had repeatedly sent memorials, but had not seen a single bit of money or grain. But now that Su Yozhen had greeted him about this matter, Jin Lian naturally didn't dare to neglect this popular person in front of the emperor. He didn't want to offend Su Yozhen, but he also didn't want her to disobey the emperor's orders. Thus, he asked tentatively, "Lord Su, His Majesty's intention is to provide for the grassland war first. If there is any surplus..." "Look, His Majesty said that if there is any left, it can be given to General Li Tong. Do you have any left now?" Su Yozhen grasped the loophole in Jin Lian's words and asked, "There are, but they are all prepared for the army that is fighting in the grasslands." "Sir Su, you also know that they are fighting against the main forces of the five-star army. Who knows how long the battle will last?" Jin Lian answered with a troubled expression. However, he didn't know that when he said these words, he had actually fallen into the other party's trap. Just as Jin Lian finished speaking, Su Yozhen's laughter sounded. Lord Jin, I'm afraid that you were joking with me. You said that we're going to face the main forces of the five-star army on the grasslands. Then I want to ask, is the main forces more powerful than Bugnam of Gojoseon? He is now in the Liaodong region. If General Li Tong is defeated because he doesn't have enough money and grain support, once the Liaodong region is completely lost, it will directly threaten the safety of our capital. At that time, even if we take down the first city, what's the use? Can you bear this responsibility? Jin Lian was stunned when he heard the question. Indeed, if the safety of the capital was threatened, it was obviously much more important than taking down the first city. Seeing that Jin Lian was silent for a while, Su Yozhen patted him on the shoulder and said, "For the safety of the capital, and in case something happens in the future, the emperor may vent his anger on Sir Jin. I think that General Li Tong should be given some food and grain." "Oh, right, this is 10,000 taels of silver. Although it's not much, it's a little token of General Li Tong's appreciation." A banknote of 10,000 taels of silver from the Yang family bank was placed in Jin Lian's hand. This was indeed sent by Li Tong. He knew that the officials of the imperial court were manipulative, so he sold everything he had to gather 20,000 taels of silver. This also made it more reasonable for Su Yozhen to appear here. Of course, the main reason why Su Yozhen agreed to do this was that Yang Chendong had given the order. Seeing that the Liaodong region was about to enter a relatively balanced phase, it was not a big deal to give them any amount of money and grain. On the contrary, if they gave more to Litong, they would give less to the Biming army on the grasslands. This might play a very positive role in the upcoming war there. To achieve great things, one must have a superhuman vision. For example, one must be able to see 3 or even 5 or more steps before taking one step. Obviously, Yang Qindong had this ability, and it was because of this action that it did play a big role in the future war on the grasslands, causing the Biming army to suffer a great loss. With 10,000 taels of silver and a great reason in front of him, Jean Lien chuckled. "Okay, Sir Su, I know what to do." Seeing how Jean Lien accepted the banknotes with a smile and immediately called for his assistant to arrange for the delivery of the provisions, Su Yozhen stood at the side and laughed out loud. First City. More than a month ago, the scenery of the grassland in June was still very beautiful, especially when it rained. There were lush green water plants everywhere, and the green scene on the vast grassland made people feel relaxed and happy at a glance. Usually, herd could often be seen around First City, and from time to time, young Mongolian girls could be heard singing beautiful songs. But now all of this did not happen. Although the water plants were still very tall and the scenery was very beautiful, the air here was filled with a murderous aura. Suddenly, the ground trembled for no reason, and ripples appeared on the low-lying water surface. Not long after, a cavalry team of hundreds of people arrived like a gust of wind and landed here. They were the Liaodong cavalry that had recently been in the limelight on the grasslands. This place was only about 10 miles away from First City, and all of this had proved that the periphery of First City was no longer safe. Things like this didn't happen every once in a while. It had already happened 3 days ago. When these Liaodong cavalry first appeared here, they even fought with a new light cavalry regiment that was in charge of patrolling the periphery of First City. Just as the two sides started fighting, more and more Liaodong cavalry appeared in all directions. If it was not for the light cavalry regiment's quick reaction and their fast speed that allowed them to quickly leave the battlefield, no one would be able to escape. Even so, in that battle, nearly 100 light cavalry soldiers had lost their lives here forever. Since the establishment of the new army, they had rarely suffered such a big loss. Just when the Liaodong cavalry was ready to take revenge and began to dig a hole, unexpectedly, the new army did not make any movements, as if they were not the ones who suffered a loss. This also greatly boosted the morale of the Liaodong cavalry. They became more active, and the distance between them and First City was getting closer and closer. It was as if they were the number one in the world. In First City, the new army's military headquarters was holding a situation analysis meeting. All the leaders of the new army's departments were present, and they were in the midst of an intense discussion. "Commander, the Liaodong cavalry is really too much. Our scouts saw from the city tower that they came 3 miles below the city this morning. This is simply provoking us and showing off. We can't let them be." Lu Zhua, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, said angrily. Lu Zhua was considered senior. It was difficult to find a few people who were older than him in the position of a division commander. Because this person's ability was not too outstanding, the speed of his promotion was not very fast. However, he had never used his qualifications to suppress others. In addition, his temperament was very good, and it was rare to see him angry with others. Over time, everyone thought that he had lost his temper. Who would have thought that he would actually lose his temper in public today? From this, it could be seen how arrogant the Liaodong cavalry was. Yes, 3 days ago, our light cavalry division was surrounded and lost a company of soldiers. This time, it's time for us to take revenge. No matter what, we can't let them go easily. Ma Bianshi, the light cavalry division's commander, said with an angry face. The other people in the meeting did not say anything, but from the fact that no one objected, they should have the same idea. Tiger's Mane, who was sitting at the head of the table, saw everyone's reaction. He then glanced at Yang Si, who was listening beside him, and shook his head helplessly. As the commander of an army, Tiger's Mane was very good at controlling the situation. In the past, no matter whether it was a big or small matter, as long as he expressed his opinion and opened his mouth, no one would say anything against it. But this time, it was obvious that everyone was angry. He was afraid that he could not rely on his personal authority to control the situation. You do it. Tiger's mane did not want to use his power to suppress others. He looked at Yang Si, who was gloating, and said with a displeased voice, Okay, Tiger's mane, don't be angry. I'll do it. Yang Si could see that Tiger's mane was really unhappy, so he quickly begged for mercy. Then, he coughed lightly to attract everyone's attention and said, Everyone, don't be anxious. If something happens, we could discuss and solve it together. The sky won't fall. Commander Yang, the sky won't fall, but we can't stand being provoked like this, and not being able to do anything is really intolerable. Otherwise, how can our new army establish itself in the world? Commander Lujua thought that Yang Si was here to cause trouble, so when he said these words, he was more or less angry. He even vaguely wanted to remind Yang Si that this was their new army's problem and had nothing to do with the logistics division. Chapter 1162. Tiger's mane also understood the hidden meaning in these words. He immediately glared at Lujua and said, Division Commander Lu, what kind of bullshit are you spouting? Let me tell you, apologize to Division Commander Yang Si immediately. Otherwise, I'll dismiss you. This sudden outburst shocked Lujua. Given Tiger's mane's usual power, Lujua also knew that his qualifications would not be taken seriously by others. He could only cup his hands together and say to Yang Si, Division Commander Yang, I was reckless just now. I'm sorry, but I'm not here for you. Okay, I know what's going on. Division Commander Lu, you don't have to explain. I just hope that everyone can listen to me, an outsider of a new army, say a few words, okay? Yang Si smiled nonchalantly. He even intentionally pointed out the fact that he wasn't a member of the new army. Lujua immediately lowered his head with a red face. The others also didn't dare to say anything against it. Not to mention that the logistics division was not only an establishment of a division, but also in charge of all the food and money in the beginning city. Yang Si himself was a servant of Bugnam of Gojoseon and was an extremely close existence. Look at what he called Tiger's mane. That was a unique title, Tiger Head. Look at what he called Beta Persei, second brother. Who was Beta Persei? He was by Yang Chendong's side all year round. All the military and political affairs were first passed through his hands before they were sent to Bugnam of Gojoseon. If such an important person was offended, it was not something that the people below could bear to let him talk nonsense beside Bugnam of Gojoseon. Considering the importance of Yang Si's identity, everyone had no choice but to calm down. When a pin drop could be heard in the conference room, Yang Si's voice also entered everyone's ears. Everyone, young master has now ended the war with the Japanese Empire and is leading the army to the Liaodong region in order to reopen a supply route to the beginning city. During this period, Baiming and Yesen have joined forces to attack our beginning city first and completely remove the nail of our 5-star army in the grassland. To be honest, this is something that young master absolutely does not want to happen, and we absolutely will not allow it to happen. That's right. Nothing can happen to the beginning city. After hearing this, everyone nodded and agreed. Of course, nothing can happen to the beginning city. Yang Si first set the tone, but then he shook his head and said, It's just that the situation is like this. It's not that I want to boost the morale of others and diminish our own prestige. Although our new army is strong enough, and we are not afraid of any opponent, this time it's the coalition army of Baiming and Yesen. Among them, Baiming sent 200,000 troops, and Yesen sent 120,000 cavalry. How can it be so easy to deal with? And according to reliable news, behind this 320,000 army, there are 30,000 Yesen cavalry and 100,000 Baiming army preparing for war. Once they find an opportunity, they will rush up at any time and tear us apart. Everyone was an important officer in the new army, so they knew a little about how many troops the other party had. However, This was the first time they heard about the 130,000 troops. Because of this, everyone quickly calculated in their hearts how high their chances of winning would be once this force joined the battle. Yangtze saw everyone's reaction and chuckled. Everyone, think about it. If we really go out of the city and fight with the enemy, then with just us alone, do you think we'll be a match for these 400,000 enemies? When the time comes, even if we use the tactic of taking turns to fight, I'm afraid we will be exhausted to death, right? Therefore, it's absolutely impossible to fight outside the city. The only thing we can do is to fight a defensive battle and let them attack. We can exhaust their strength in the continuous siege and achieve the goal of drawing everyone's military strength closer. We indeed don't have much confidence in fighting outside the city, but if we let them attack while we defend, our chances of winning aren't small. For this matter, Tigerhead and I have already made preparations. Now, I can tell everyone everything. For this battle, our logistics division has prepared 70,000 soldiers to defend the city. As soon as his voice fell, everyone in the meeting, except for Commander Humang, looked very shocked. 70,000 people, that's a lot. No wonder the logistics division was so busy a while ago. It seems like it was because of this matter. That's right. With these 70,000 men and our new army, it's not like we don't have a chance to defend the city. There's a chance for us to fight this battle well. While the officers were still sighing about the 70,000 new soldiers, there were people in the crowd who were thinking about other things. For example, the recon commander, Ding Shan, was willing to use his brain. To be able to become a recon commander, needless to say, one's brain had to be flexible. Only an extremely smart person could do this job well. Because Ding Shan used to dress up as a wealthy merchant and go deep into enemy territory when he was doing reconnaissance, he also knew a lot about economic matters. Seeing that everyone was excited about the 70,000 soldiers guarding the city, Ding Shan was indeed thinking about other things. Since the commander called everyone for a meeting this time, he should say whatever was on his mind. He decided to raise the two questions in his heart. Commander, Division Commander Yangtze, I have two questions to ask, but I don't know if I can say them. After hesitating for a while, Ding Shan finally decided to open his mouth and ask the questions. Commander Ding, I've said before that you can say anything in this meeting. If you have any questions, just take them out for everyone to discuss, Tigerhead said. He knew that Ding Shan was worried that talking too much would cause him to be dissatisfied. With Tigerhead's support, Ding Shan became bolder and smoother when he spoke. Commander, Division Commander Yangtze, I have a total of two questions. First, the sudden appearance of 70,000 soldiers guarding the city is naturally a good thing. However, as far as I know, there is not much food left in the city. If the beginning city is surrounded for a long time, how long can the food last? Second, if Baiming and Yeshen give up attacking our beginning city and attack Mo Bay City instead, do we need reinforcements? He did not say much, but all he said were key words. In an instant, the originally silent meeting room became lively again. All the officers fell into a discussion again. Among them, some said that there was a problem in Mo Bay City and that they needed reinforcements. Their point of view was that it was also a part of the beginning city, so there must not be any problems. Of course, there were also objections. The reason was that even the beginning city was in danger. How could they spare the energy to reinforce others? What if the opponents set a trap outside the city? Wouldn't rushing out like this be exactly what they wanted? As for the problem of food, everyone was smart enough not to talk about it. After all, this matter was managed by the commander and the logistics division. Besides, they really did not have a better way to solve the problem. Humang didn't stop the officers from discussing. Some things were just like that. If there was a problem, it wouldn't be good to suppress it. On the contrary, it was not a big deal to let them vent and talk about the matter. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the discussion became softer and softer. Humang then gave Yangtze a look. Yangtze nodded in understanding. Then, he coughed softly and said, Everyone, I want to say that everyone's worries are unnecessary. Regarding the problem of Mo Bay City, the young master specially sent a telegram. We don't need to care about the matters there. Even if we see the Baiming army or Yeshen's cavalry heading there, we don't need to care. This time, what we need to do is to nail the beginning city like a nail and ensure that the city is not lost. Therefore, everyone doesn't need to think about this problem. Instead, we need to discuss the matter of food with everyone. Since Yang Si said that the young master had said so, everyone really did not need to worry. After all, no matter how powerful they could not be more powerful than Yang Chendong. Therefore, after a moment of surprise, everyone's gaze fell on Yang Si again, and they continued to listen. Everyone, since last year until now, our beginning city has not had any supplies for 1 year and 4 months. Although last autumn was considered a bumper year, there were still a lot of people who needed to be fed. In addition, the Far Eastern region also needs our food supply, so we did not have a lot of food in stock. Now, it's even more difficult. The enemy has surrounded the beginning city. I'm afraid that we won't be able to get this year's supply. As a result, our food can only last for 3 months at most. As Yang Si spoke, he stretched out 3 fingers. Without waiting for everyone to say anything, he continued, "Remember, the 3 months I said refers to the time when there is no war. Once there is a war, I'm afraid that we won't be able to last for 1.5 months. What? I'm afraid it's not possible in such a short period of time." When they heard that there was only 1.5 months of food, the faces of the officers became a little ugly. Everyone knew that when there was no war, there was no need to consume too much physical strength, so the food required would be correspondingly reduced. On the contrary, when there was a war, they would need to maintain enough physical strength. The more they moved, the more they would need to eat. However, everyone did not expect that the food was only enough for 1.5 months. The current Bugnam of Gojoseon had just entered the Liaodong region not long ago. If he wanted to solve the problem there and open a new supply line, it would not be possible in a short period of time. In this way, didn't it mean that the food in the beginning city was already very insufficient? Seeing the changes in the officers' faces, Tiger Mane knew that he had to say something at this moment. He said with a serious face, "I believe everyone has heard Commander Yang Si's words very clearly. That's right, one of our biggest problems now is food. How to save food has become one of our main tasks in the next step. For this reason, the commander announced that from today onwards until there is no war, the food standard of the soldiers will be reduced by 2/3. In other words, the previous 3 meals a day will now be changed to 1 meal a day. Even if there is a war in the future, the army will at most have 2 meals a day. Everyone needs to make this clear to the soldiers in advance and make some mental preparations in advance. Is there any problem?" If we continue to develop like this, I'm afraid we will have nothing in half a month. Tiger's Mane, you know that the soldiers stand on the city tower every day to defend against the enemy. If they don't even have enough to eat, how can they have the strength to fight? Yang Si, as a logistics officer in charge of money and provisions, actually took the initiative to speak for the army at this moment. From this, it could be seen how limited the food distributed every day was. No, half a month is definitely not enough. You have also read the telegram just now. I'm afraid it will take at least a month for the young master to arrive here. This does not exclude the possibility of other accidents happening. In other words, it may take even longer. When that time comes, we will have an empty army, but no food. How are we going to fight this war? So, as if he had made a very heavy decision, Tiger's Mane said aloud, "So the food distribution must be checked. The soldiers who are on the battlefield can only have 1 meal a day. Those who are not on the battlefield can have 1 meal every 2 days. Usually, we can boil more water for them to drink. At worst, we can add some rice and make it into rice soup. It's just a little thinner, that's all." "What? That won't do." When Yumian heard this, he was shocked. Although he was not a soldier, he knew that if the soldiers did not keep up with the nutrition, it would greatly affect their performance. "What do you mean by that?" "I am the commander of the new army, the highest-ranking officer here. Since I have said so, then it's settled. I know my soldiers, they will definitely be able to persevere." When Tiger's Mane said this, tears were already welling up in his eyes. This decision was made by him, and he knew very well what the consequences would be. However, if they did not suffer now and tighten their stomachs, once there was not a single grain of food in the city would collapse by itself. Tiger's Mane's attitude was very firm. After Yu Mian and Yang Si looked at each other, they knew that it was useless to say anything now. Both of them expressed their support. Moreover, they promised that the city lord's mansion and logistics team would start to save food. They would have one meal every 2 days and would mainly drink porridge. The three of them represented the highest administrative organization in the beginning city. Their opinions were unified, and the order was quickly passed down. Naturally, it attracted a lot of complaints. The day's attack and defense battle stopped as the sun set. The soldiers of the 5-star army who had been fighting for the whole day retreated from the city tower. Each of them had a yellow face and their legs were weak. They originally thought that they could have a full meal, but when they saw that there was only a little rice in the clear water waiting for them, and it was not even rice soup, their faces became even uglier. To be able to become a soldier of the 5-star army, the requirements were very strict. They did not want the old, those who were too young, and those who were weak and sickly. This also caused most of them to be young and middle-aged men. These people were naturally stronger, but at the same time, they also had a large appetite. The food of the 5-star army had always been good, and it was full of meat and fish. Even so, they could usually eat 2 big bowls of rice for a meal. When there was not enough oil, it was normal to eat 3 or 4 big bowls. However, now, they could eat as much as they wanted, but they could not eat until they were full. One could imagine how big the contrast was. Therefore, some soldiers could not help but complain. If we eat this, how are we going to go up the city tower to fight tomorrow? That's right. If we don't have enough food and don't have the strength, how are we going to defend the city? That's right, that's right. Someone took the lead, and soon, more soldiers began to agree. They did not want to cause trouble, but their stomachs rebelled first. Enough. The battalion commander in charge of leading the army had a very serious expression. Don't feel indignant for yourselves. The first city has been surrounded for more than a year. It's already good that there is still food to eat. Although you are working hard and even risking your lives, at least you can still drink rice soup. However, look at the people in the city. They have even forgotten what rice soup tastes like. Now, there's not even a tree in the city. Do you know why? It's because even the bark has been eaten clean by them. With the battalion commander's roar, the soldiers who were complaining stopped talking. This was because they knew that what the battalion commander said was the truth. Not only were all the trees in the city eaten clean, but the people were also the same. Even the high-ranking officials were the same. It was said that the city lord, Yu Mian, only drank half a bowl of rice soup for 3 days. He usually drank water to allay his hunger. Because of this, he had already fainted once. When the battalion commander saw that the soldiers had stopped talking, he did not continue to reprimand the soldiers. Instead, he said in a sincere tone, "Soldiers, I know that everyone is very hungry. To be honest, I'm also hungry. However, I do not complain because I know that it is worth it for us to guard this place. Because of our existence, hundreds of thousands of people in the city can survive. And if we are not here, once the Beiming army and Yeshin's troops rush into the first city, at that time, not many of our brothers, sisters, and family members will be able to survive. And for them, even if I die on the city tower, it will be worth it. It will be glorious. Compared to death, it's just hunger. What's there to be afraid of?" The battalion commander's family was in the first city. The reason why he was able to persist until now was more for the sake of his family. After he said this, all the soldiers' complaints disappeared. If there were some of them who still had some opinions in their hearts, but even the officers and the city lord were like this. What else could they say? All right, eat early and rest early. There will be a big battle tomorrow. The deputy battalion commander took the initiative to stand up and smooth things over. A small storm was suppressed just like that. The matter was quickly discovered by the military scouts and reported to the commander, Tiger's Mane. Looking at the report, he sighed and said, "These are our soldiers. What lovely soldiers. With such soldiers, There is no reason why we can't win this battle. Yes, the soldiers are willing to sacrifice their families for the greater good. This spirit is worth learning. The Logistics Division commander, Yang Si, nodded in agreement. Just learning is not enough. Yang Si, I know you still have some food. Why don't you distribute some? Otherwise, I'm really afraid that the soldiers won't be able to withstand the hunger. As Tiger's mane spoke, he looked at Yang Si with a yearning gaze. Yang Si was the official in charge of logistics appointed by Yang Chendong. He had so much power that even if he did something wrong, Tiger's mane did not have the power to punish him at will. With such power, Yang Si did not disappoint Yang Chendong. He managed the logistics in an orderly manner, especially when it came to money and food. He kept a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Even though there was a severe shortage of food in the city, Yang Si still had a backup plan. He left some food and didn't take it out. For some reason, Tiger's mane found out about this matter. He wanted to use this food more than once to save the city. Absolutely not. Yang Si knew what Tiger's mane was talking about. He said in a very decisive and unquestionable tone, "That is the real last life-saving food. It may bring about an extremely important impact and result. It absolutely cannot be used now." Chapter 1164. But, seeing that Yang Si refused again, Tiger's mane wanted to continue persuading him. "Tiger's mane, we are brothers, but there are some things that I won't listen to you. This is also young master's idea. Of course, if you can persuade young master to send a telegram, I can let you handle the food." Afraid that the rejection would affect the friendship between the two, Yang Si had no choice but to use Yang Chendong's name. Upon hearing this, Tiger's mane lowered his head. Since it was the young master's idea, he definitely did not dare to question it. "Sigh. Well, I hope we can hold on until then." As the war continued day by day, the situation of the shortage of food in the city became more and more serious. Just yesterday, there were more than 100 people in the city who fainted because of hunger. Among them, there were more than 10 officials in the city lord's mansion, and City Lord Yumian was among them. Because Yumian lacked exercise all year round, his physical condition was naturally not as good as Tiger's mane and the others. However, he fainted twice, which was enough to show how critical the situation in the first city was. Outside the first city, a new day of siege had to end with the sunset. In the big tent, Baiming's general tent, the generals were sitting there. The theme of the meeting was to analyze the problem of capturing the first city. As the highest commander in the army, Marquis Wu Qingho, the military commander, Shi Heng, sat at the head of the table. To his left and right sat the great general of Liaodong Iron Cavalry, Fang Dingshan, primary second-grade general, Sun Hong, primary second-grade general, and commander of Wanchuan's Department of Defense, Shi Wanshan, primary second-grade general, as well as their subordinates. Although they were all second-grade generals, there was still a difference in their ranks. For example, Fang Dingshan was sitting on the first seat on the left. As a commander of the Imperial Guards, he originally had the qualifications to be superior. Many times, even Shi Heng could not order and command him. Instead, he had to discuss everything with him. Next was Shaanxi Datong Army General Sun Hong. Originally, the Shaanxi Commander-in-Chief was him, while the Datong Commander-in-Chief was Shi Wanshan. But because he was a very good flatterer, when he saw how powerful Fang Dingshan was, he immediately leaned over and gave him money, women, and even buying him 2 residences in the capital. Very quickly, on the grounds that the power of the army should be centralized, and on the grounds that Datong was located in Shaanxi, he was given the position of 2 commander-in-chief. Now, he was naturally the third most important person in the Baiming army. The last one was Shi Wanshan, who was also a second-grade official. Speaking of which, Shi Wanshan was really unlucky. After following Yang Chendong and picking up some benefits and victories, he was promoted to Datong Commander-in-Chief. However, before he could secure his seat, Sun Hong beat him to it, and he returned to his old position of Commander-in-Chief of Wanall Department. Although there was no change in his official rank, his actual authority had decreased by a lot. For this reason, the commanders under him, Ancient River and Qian Shi Ning Wenfeng, had often fought against injustice for him. But with the current situation, what was the point? But even so, Shi Wanshan, as a second-grade general, should have been seated in the fourth position, which was the second seat from the left. But who would have thought that Great General Fang Dingshan would place Deputy General Luo Baikuan in this position? So he had no choice but to sit in the second seat from the right, becoming number 5 in the army. If it were a normal person, they would have already lost their cool in the face of such suppression. But Shi Wanshan did not do so. On the contrary, he continued to do what he was supposed to do, making it so that Fang Dingshan could not find a suitable excuse to deal with him. There was no such thing as love or hatred for no reason in this world. The reason for all of this was that when Fang Dingshan first came to the Datong Prefecture, he had hinted that Shi Wanshan, who was still a commander-in-chief at the time, wanted money. To be able to become the commander-in-chief of the imperial bodyguards, Fang Dingshan was not only capable, but more importantly, he was willing to give money. He would try his best to make friends with anyone who could talk to the emperor. Naturally, he would spend a lot of money to establish a good relationship with them. But where would he get this money from? Of course, he had to think of a way to get it. Thus, it fell into the hands of generals like Shi Wanshan, who held military power. It was true that Shi Wanshan was the commander of the army, but because of his background, he was different from the other generals of the Great Ming Dynasty. He knew that he had to treat his soldiers well, because he knew that this was the only way the soldiers would work hard at crucial times. Therefore, the matter of embezzling the soldiers' pay had never occurred in the army under his command. If he did not embezzle the soldiers' pay and only relied on some gray income, where would he have the extra money to give Fang Dingshan? Furthermore, he had also asked around and found out that this person had a huge appetite. Fang Dingshan wanted at least 70% of the military budget and only left 30% for himself. This kind of person was not someone he could satisfy. Since this was the case, it was better not to give him even once. With the limited amount of money, he could give the officials in the capital some favors and say a few words at crucial times. One demanded money and the other did not give it. This was how the enmity appeared. When everyone saw that Fang Dingshan was very unhappy with Shi Wanshan, even Shi Heng, who was the commander-in-chief of the army, began to distance himself from him. Moreover, in the siege of the city these days, the soldiers of the Datong Prefecture had all been used. In the past month, the number of casualties alone had reached 30,000, and there were countless more injured. Because of the lack of provisions, the strength of the 5-star army in the first city was constantly declining. The topic of this meeting was to let the soldiers of the Datong Prefecture replace the soldiers of the Datong Prefecture. To put it bluntly, seeing that the opportunity to make a great contribution had arrived, they were ready to snatch the credit. At the beginning of the meeting, Commander-in-Chief Shi Heng made the topic public. He even said to Shi Wanshan with an unfriendly expression, "General Shi, after such a long time, even the outer city of the first city has not been taken down. You have an unshirkable responsibility. After my discussion with the other generals, we have decided to let all of you retreat and have a good rest. You can leave everything to Commander Sun Hong." Why? We have already made great progress, and seeing that someone was going to take advantage of the situation, the commander of the Datong Prefecture, Ancient River, who had a bad temper, suddenly stood up and said angrily with a red face, "How dare you? How can you speak here?" Fang Dingshan glanced at Ancient River and then snorted at Shi Wanshan. "General Shi, your men are too unruly. You're not fit to be a general. How can you say that about my—" Ancient River, who was furious, wanted to reprimand him again. However, Shi Wanshan had already stood up and stood in front of him. He bowed to Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan and said, I'm sorry. This bad temper is all because of me. I apologize to both of you on behalf of General Gu. Also, I agree to let the soldiers who are attacking the city retreat for a rest. I also want to thank both of you for your sympathy." One would never slap a smiling person. Shi Wanshan was so humble in front of so many generals. It could be said that he had lost all his face. Since they did not want to be called unreasonable, Shi Hong and Fong Dingshan did not say anything. Instead, they looked at Sun Hong, who was sitting there with a smile, and said, "Commander Sun, I'll leave the rest to you. I hope you can perform well and take down the first city as soon as possible. That would be a great contribution. Don't be like some people who are afraid of death." "Well said, well said. I'll leave the rest to Deputy Commander General Tsingguang. I have something to do and need to return to the Datong Prefecture first," Sun Hong replied with a smile. Everyone was very clear about who this referred to. Everyone could not help but look at Shi Wanshan with a trace of coldness. There were even some people who intentionally shifted their positions and distanced themselves from Shi Wanshan and the other two. It was as if whoever was closer to him would be infected and be tainted with bad luck. Shi Wanshan's expression remained the same as usual. It was as if all of this had nothing to do with him. Of course, from his clenched fists, his heart was not as calm and indifferent as he appeared on the surface. After the meeting ended, everyone walked out of the tent in twos and threes. Only Shi Wanshan and the other two were left at the back. There was no other way. Everyone was rushing out of the tent as if they were deliberately provoking them. In this regard, Shi Wanshan suppressed Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng. He waited for everyone to leave the tent before bringing the two of them out. As soon as they came out, they heard Feng Liang's words. "Oomph, you're even taking your time to walk. No wonder the soldiers below are all trash." "Who are you talking about?" General Gu He, who had been unable to suppress his anger for a long time, shouted loudly. He lifted his leg and kicked towards the person who spoke. No one thought that Ancient River would actually dare to fight in the main tent. For a moment, all the generals who wanted to leave were stunned. They watched as Ancient River kicked the person who spoke, and then a black shadow flew out. The person who flew out was Datong's deputy, General Tsingguang. He was a soft-footed general who had relied on giving money to Shi Hong and Fong Dingshan to become a secondary rank 2 military officer. It was because he had given money to Tsingguang that Ancient River had humiliated him in public. Now that he finally had a chance to return the favor, how could he be polite? He immediately mocked him. He never thought that Ancient River would be so bold as to attack a fellow general in front of everyone. In the laws of the Great Ming Dynasty, there were strict rules against fighting between generals. In order to prevent internal strife, the heaviest punishment was death. Gu He was also in a fit of anger. He did not consider so much at all. That was why he kicked out. After he kicked out, Shi Wanshan, who was at the side, was shocked. He quickly tried to stop Gu He. At the same time, he shouted, "Gu He, you can't do this. It's not worth losing your life for this kind of person." After he kicked out, Ancient River instantly thought of the military rules and regulations. However, considering that he had already attacked, how could he be polite? Since he was going to die, no matter what, he wanted to kill to make up for it. He directly rushed towards Tsingguang, who was lying on the ground. Chapter 1165. Seeing that another large foot was about to land on Tsingguang's body, and it was aimed at his face, the other generals who were watching the commotion cried out in alarm. They then retreated one after another, as if they were worried that they would be provoked by the aftermath and get involved in the dispute. Contrary to the crowd, there was a figure that shot out swiftly and used his own body to block Ancient River's foot. Plop! After a muffled sound, the figure pulled Tsingguang and retreated 2 feet away. Ancient River was furious that his first kick had failed. He strode forward, intending to give Tsingguang 2 more kicks. In short, he was determined to kick Tsingguang to death. However, he no longer had the chance because the figure that was protecting Tsingguang had already stepped forward and stood horizontally in front of him. The person who had just arrived was young, but his face was full of heroic spirit. Facing the furious Ancient River, not only did he not back down, but he also threw a punch at the unsuspecting Ancient River's chest, forcing him to take 3 steps back. Taking advantage of this, Shi Wanshan rushed over and hugged the furious Ancient River from behind. When the other generals saw that the matter was about to end, They all pretended to be good people and surrounded Ancient River, causing him to have no chance to attack. What's going on? Just as the generals were in a mess, a mighty voice rang out. It was Shi Hung, who had rushed over after hearing the news. When he saw Shi Hung appear, Tsingguang did not know where he got the strength from, but he immediately stood up from the ground and jogged to Shi Hung's side. Marquis, you have to make a decision for me. Just now, this ancient river kicked me like a madman. If it wasn't for the fact that my subordinates still had some strength, I'm afraid that I would have been kicked to death. Tsingguang was right. Ancient River wanted to take his life. If it wasn't for the fact that weapons were not allowed in the tent during the political discussion, he would have been killed by now. Ancient River, how dare you do something like this? Men, lock him up. After Marquis investigates the matter, he will be severely punished. Shi Hung said with a serious face. For something like this to happen in the military, it was clear that Marquis did not put him in his eyes at all. It was no wonder that he was so angry. Immediately, a few armored soldiers came over and tied Ancient River up. Then, under the anxious gazes of Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng, he was taken away. Shi Wanshan, who knew that military discipline was like a mountain, knew very well what the consequences would be if this matter was carried out. He immediately ran in front of Shi Hung and pleaded, Marquis, this is all a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Can you be magnanimous and be lenient? What misunderstanding? We'll talk about it after the investigation. Shi Hung flicked his sleeves and left. He did not give Shi Wanshan much opportunity to speak. On the other side, Tsingguang had a complacent look on his face. He said to the young general who had saved him, Su Dei, you did well this time. Yes, there is a position for a captain in the military. I think you are very suitable. Thank you for the promotion, General. Su Dei hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed his head. However, no one noticed that when he bowed his head, a trace of joy flashed through his eyes. This was because no one knew that Su Dei had long been one of Yang Qindong's men. Even now, Yang Qindong still owed him a female soldier from the 5-Star Army's publicity team. Therefore, after everyone left, Su Dei took the 50 taels of silver that Tsingguang had rewarded him and went to a newly built restaurant next to the military camp. No one knew that he had secretly met the restaurant owner, who was a secret agent from the Security Bureau. Please report to the higher-ups that Ancient River's commanding officer is aware that he might be in danger. Generals Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng will definitely do their best to rescue him. After relaying the message to the restaurant owner, Su Dei, like many other customers who came here, found a seat and ordered a table full of food and wine. Before he finished eating, the secret agent had already told him about the message that Yang Qindong had personally sent to him. He had to increase his efforts to stop Ancient River's actions, but it would be best if he could ensure that Ancient River didn't die. After Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng hurriedly returned to the large tent, the two of them looked at each other with a bitter expression. General, with Tsingguang's narrow-minded personality and our bad relationship with Shi Hung, I'm afraid that General Ancient River's fate will be sealed. Fongding might even interfere. If that's the case, I'm afraid he won't be able to keep his life. Ning Wenfeng had always been regarded as a strategist by Shi Wanshan. This analysis also showed the calm side of his personality. You're right. Ancient River was too impulsive this time. It's too difficult to save him now. It seems that we'll have to spend a lot of money. After sitting down, Shi Wanshan revealed a headache expression. Ancient River absolutely couldn't die. Everyone knew that he did this to stand up for himself. If something really happened to him, how could he still have the face to lead the army? However, the price to pay to save this person was unimaginable. There was only one way, and that was to give him money. Shi Wanshan, who was familiar with Shi Hung and Tsingguang, was very clear that in the eyes of these people, there was no problem that couldn't be solved with money. Moreover, Ancient River didn't really kill Tsingguang, so there was still hope for everything. The difficult part was how much money to spend. Brother Ning, how much money do we have now? However, now that Tsingguang has made a move, and not only him, but General Fong Dingshan has also come to the marquee about this matter. Now, unless the two of them can shut up, Ancient River's life will be in danger. After all, no one can swallow the humiliation of beating someone in front of so many comrades. Shi Qing's attitude was good. This made Ning Wenfeng unable to vent his anger, even if he wanted to. In the end, he could only go back to the barracks to find Shi Wanshan and tell him what he saw. General, according to Shi Qing's words, the two of them want the same amount. That's a total of 300,000 taels of silver. If General Sun Hong hadn't left the barracks and returned to the Datong Prefecture, I'm afraid he would also ask for it. 300,000 taels of silver? Why don't they just rob us? Shi Wanshan roared after hearing this. It was no wonder that Shi Wanshan was so angry. According to the salary of the Great Ming Dynasty, the monthly salary of a second-rank official like him was only 61 stones, which was about 777 taels of silver. Now, the Zhu family's bank had to deduct 30% of that. In other words, he only received about 500 taels of silver a month. Even if he added in some gray income, the average monthly income was only 2,000 taels of silver. This was not a small amount at the time. It would take him 4 or 5 years to gather 100,000 taels of silver. Now, he needed 300,000 taels of silver. Even if he sold himself, he would not be able to gather that much money. Shaking his head, Shi Wanshan fell into distress. Ancient River got such a result because he stood up for him. He absolutely had to save him. However, with such a large expenditure, it was obvious that not only would the pension not be enough, but the soldiers who were still alive would also be affected. Not only this month, but also next month, and the following month's salary would be deducted a lot. He didn't know what kind of consequences this would lead to. If there was any other way, he would definitely not agree, but there was no better way. Chapter 1166. General, are we going to save him or not? Ning Wenfeng cleverly didn't ask if he was going to take it or not, because he was truly worried that he would be rejected. At the same time, he also hoped that he would be rejected. After all, this would affect the morale and quality of life of the entire Wangquan city soldiers. After an unknown amount of time, Shi Wanshan, who was panting heavily, said, "Save him. Take all the silver and go now. If we take too long, I'm afraid that they will increase the price again." After saying this, Shi Wanshan fell back into his chair with a plop. It was clear that he had used up all the strength in his body to say this. I'll do it right away." After letting out a sigh, Ning Wenfeng didn't know whether he should be happy or disappointed, but in the end, he still walked away. In less than an hour, Gu He, who had received the silver, was released. As soon as Ancient River returned to the barracks, he knelt in front of Shi Wanshan. "General, my life is yours from now on. Quickly get up. To tell the truth, I don't even know how to face the brothers below." Shi Wanshan helped Ancient River up, his eyes lifeless as he spoke. Faced with this problem, Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng didn't say anything, because they both knew that the time to test them had come. In particular, once the news spread, the morale of the army would be thrown into chaos. They could only hope that this matter wouldn't be known by outsiders and that they could hide it for as long as possible. They could live frugally and slowly make up for it. This was a good idea, but there were some people who wouldn't hide this matter, such as Tsingguang. After receiving the 100,000 taels of silver, Tsingguang knew how to conduct himself. He gave another 20,000 taels of silver to Shi Hong and Fong Dingshan respectively. He was very pleased with the 60,000 taels of silver he received. After leaving the tent, he patted the shoulder of Su Dei, who was waiting outside. "Not bad. Your reminder is correct. If it were a bit later, I'm afraid that Ancient River would have been released, and we wouldn't have received any benefits." "Haha. Thank you for your praise, General. However, don't think that the matter will be settled just because they paid the money. Since they dared to lay a hand on the General, they should be prepared for retaliation." Su Dei spoke as if he was defending Tsingguang against injustice. When Tsingguang heard these words, he felt great. When you become a major in the future, I'll have to call you Little General Sue. All right, you just said that this matter isn't over yet. I don't know what else you have in mind. You should know that once I take the money, I won't be able to find trouble with Ancient River. General, we can't openly make trouble for some people, but we can do it secretly. For example, where did their 300,000 taels of silver come from? They must have touched the soldiers' pay and pensions. If we spread this news, what kind of effect do you think it will have? General, with your talent, you're only a deputy commander-in-chief. Even I feel wronged for you. To put it bluntly, it's not that you don't have the ability, but you lack a suitable position. The position of commander of the Capital Department is a rank 2 military officer. You see, once he mentioned that he could be promoted, there was no need for Su Dei to remind him. Sun Guang's eyes had already lit up. Ha, not bad, not bad. Little General Su, you're right. I know what to do next. Just like this, Shi Wanshan and the other two, who originally wanted to hide this matter from others, never thought that this news would be spread all over the military camp that night. Because of this matter, some major commanders and Kiliarchs in the military came looking for them. For a time, the Capital Department didn't need to fight anymore, and everyone was already in a state of panic. Sun Guang only asked someone to spread the news. Early the next morning, he led the soldiers of the Datong Prefecture to begin the siege. What he wanted now was to achieve military merits. Once he took down the first city, the emperor would be happy and would definitely reward him based on his merits. At that time, it would be reasonable for him to be promoted. Although the soldiers of the Capital Department were replaced by the weaker soldiers of the Datong Prefecture, the soldiers on the walls of the first city still found it very difficult. All of this was because they didn't have enough food. They couldn't even fill their stomachs. Only 5 days later, the outer city of the first city was finally breached. After taking down the outer city, Sun Guang was naturally very excited. Although in order to achieve military merits, he didn't rest much in the past 5 days, and the losses of the army were not small, he finally saw results. This was absolutely good news for a person who only wanted to climb up. As for how many ordinary soldiers died because of this, it had nothing to do with him. What was worth mentioning was that the first army to break through the perimeter was the one led by Su Dei as a major. Originally, because Su Dei was in his 20s, he was too young and didn't have enough experience. Many people had opinions about his promotion. Even Shi Hung had people complain. However, now that he had obtained such a great military merit, it was equivalent to making the first contribution. Finally, the voices of opposition gradually suppressed. Su Dei's position became more stable. After taking down the outer city, the siege didn't stop. However, in comparison, the inner city was taller and stronger. If they wanted to take it down, they would still have to pay a great price. However, after more than a year of besieging the inner city, Shi Hung was still very confident. In order to ensure that the mission could be completed, Shi Hung even ordered the 100,000 Ming army that was prepared behind him to be transferred together with the 30,000 cavalrymen under Yesen. So far, in the process of attacking the first city, a total of 450,000 soldiers had been invested. If the 100,000 soldiers from the 5-star army were included, the scale of this war was definitely not small. Immerse River. Beside the river, there was a large group of cavalrymen passing by. Looking from afar, it was majestic and seemed to be endless. In front of the cavalrymen, there was a bright 5-star flag. Behind the flag, there was a flag with the words Far Eastern Army written on it. Yes, the army that came from afar was the 40,000 cavalrymen led by the Far Eastern Army's commander. Chun Bo received a telegram from Yang Shindong and rushed over. There was only one goal, which was to ensure the absolute safety of North Desert City. North Desert City was the second largest city built by the 5-star army on the grassland after the first city. After a few years of development, it had become quite large and had become a flag on the grassland. For many Mongols, North Desert City was even more intimate because the proportion of Mongols in this city had reached 80%. The first city could not fall. It represented a shopping center and was the most important base for the 5-star army to develop here. North Desert City could not fall. This was a huge flag for the Mongols. If there was a problem here, it would be an extremely severe blow to the morale and public opinion of the grassland. In order to ensure the absolute safety of North Desert City, Yang Chendong had sent a telegram to the far eastern army early on. He told them that no matter what, they had to send as much of their main force to the south to ensure that this flag would not fall. This was also the reason why Yang Chendong had sent a telegram to Tiger's Mane and told him to just protect the first city and not care about other places. Military Commander, after passing the Immerse River, we will reach North Desert City in 2 days. Can we let our brothers have a good rest first? The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, Dai Qua, walked at the front of the group as the vanguard. He was responsible for opening the road and building bridges. Fortunately, the track from the grassland area to the far eastern region would be completed soon. In fact, there are not many places that they had to work hard to open the road. This time, in order to completely implement Yang Chendong's instructions, Chenbo only left the 2nd Cavalry Division to continue protecting the far eastern region. The other 4 divisions, a total of 40,000 people, were all brought out. He knew that the vanguard of the 1st Cavalry Division was indeed very tired, but considering that they were less than 48 hours away from the target, he still shook his head and said to Dai Qua, "Division Commander, tell the soldiers to work hard and try to reach the Sandfong Mountain on the outskirts of North Desert City as soon as possible. That is our real destination. Bugnam of Gojoseon has prepared enough food for us to let the soldiers have a full meal." Originally, when he heard that they had to continue on their journey, Dai Qua wanted to dissuade them. However, when he heard that there was food waiting for him in front, he immediately said happily, "Okay, Military Commander, I will tell the soldiers the good news." It wasn't that Dai Qua was overjoyed at the sight of delicious food. It was just that the Far East Army hadn't been satisfied with food recently. Although the land was vast and fertile, it was sparsely populated. In addition, the weather conditions were very bad. It was winter for half of the year. In such an environment, it was too difficult to rely on oneself to solve the problem of food and drink in a short period of time. Although a lot of wasteland had been opened up in the far eastern region in the past 2 years, and with the material support from the first city, the situation had changed a lot. However, to be self-sufficient, it would take at least 2 years. This was because 1 million foreign people had entered the Liaodong region through various means. Otherwise, it would take a long time to achieve it. Without enough food, the people there had formed a habit that they did not dare to eat until they were full. They were afraid that they would not be able to eat until they were full. Just like when the army went out this time, the money and food they brought was also extremely limited. Most of it was left for the 2nd Cavalry Division. Along the way, even during the march, it was difficult for them to eat until they were full. This made them have a special desire for food. Now that they heard that there was delicious food waiting in front of them, it was no wonder that Dai Qua was so excited and happy. When he told the news to the soldiers in the army, as expected, everyone's enthusiasm was aroused. The speed of their advance was also involuntarily increased by 2 points. Originally, it was scheduled to take 2 days to reach the Three Peaks Mountain. Under the temptation of food, they were forced to advance by half a day. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, it was only noon. From afar, they saw dozens of cavalry coming toward them. This was the rescue team arranged by Xian Honghai, the commander of the Mo Bay Division. When the Mo Bay Division was to be established, no one was willing to go. In the end, he took the initiative to stand up and gain the trust and favor of Yang Chendong. Just like this time, in the entire Mo Bay city, only he knew about the Far Eastern Army's problem. Under the guidance of the welcoming team, the 40,000 cavalry entered the Three Peaks Mountain. After they left, a cavalry team of hundreds appeared here. They were responsible for cleaning up the battlefield and cleaning up all the hoofprints. Chapter 1167. Under the beginning city. 10 days had passed since Singwang led the troops to attack the city. In addition to the success of taking down the outer city on the 5th day, there was an extremely fierce battle. Countless lives were lost here, but the inner city of the beginning city was still unbreakable. They thought that after besieging the city for so long as they attacked, the morale of the other side would definitely collapse. They never thought that it would be so difficult to fight. This made the chief of the Wara Wara, Yesen, who had been a bystander, very dissatisfied. Yesen appeared on the outskirts of the beginning city very early and witnessed the whole process of being besieged. In his view, he also came to the same conclusion as Shurhong. That was, after being besieged for so long without the support of money and food, it was inevitable that the city would be taken down. He also did not expect that it would be so difficult to attack the city, and that it would not be taken down for a long time. Time passed day by day, and it was almost August. In 2 months, there would be heavy snow here, which would be even more disadvantageous for attacking the city. He could not help but feel a little anxious. In the words of the Han people, we can't hang on a tree. We have to find a way to take the initiative to attack. After saying this to the generals, Yesen took the initiative to go to the tent of the great Ming dynasty's Marquis Wu Qingho. He found Shurhong and said that he wanted to lead the troops to attack Mo Bay City. Attack Mo Bay City? Isn't this too hasty? In the tent, Shurhong did not seem to agree with Yesen's proposal. When he answered this question, there was some hesitation in his expression. We can't wait anymore. There will be heavy snow here in 2 months at most. If that's the case, it will not be conducive to the movement of the army and the attack. Once the weather is cold, we can only wait until spring next year. At that time, who can guarantee that there will be no accidents? Seeing that Shurhong was still so hesitant, Yesen was of course very unhappy, and his voice was raised a few degrees. Yesen was angry, and Shurhong felt a headache coming on. Before coming here, the Daizong Emperor had said more than once that they must maintain a good relationship with the world of Wara. At least, before the 5-star army was dealt with, they must not fall out with them. If the other party made any request, as long as it was not too excessive, they should agree to it. Thinking of this, Shurhong could only lower his voice and ask, "What do you think, Chief Yesen?" The idea is very simple. Before the beginning city is taken down, our cavalry is of no use at all. I suggest that we open up another battlefield and go to North Desert City. As for here, I will leave 50,000 grassland cavalrymen. Once the city is breached, they will help Wu Qingho destroy the escaping enemies. Of course, you also need 50,000 Biming infantry to help me take down Mo Bay City. Yesen laid out his plan. Exchanging 50,000 cavalrymen for 50,000 infantrymen, no matter how one looked at it, Yesen had to pay a higher price. But he still did it. Naturally, he had his own ideas. First, he left 50,000 cavalrymen. Once the beginning city was breached, these people were enough to grab a lot of benefits. Second, the 50,000 infantrymen of Biming were the vanguard, and the biggest loss would be this infantryman army. Compared to his cavalry guarding the rear, it was a much better deal. Third, if they really could not take down North Desert City, the loss would only be the 50,000 Biming infantry, and he would return safely with the 100,000 cavalrymen. In this way, the strength of the 5-star army would be consumed, and the strength of the Biming army would also be consumed. No matter how one looked at it, he had a big advantage. Yesen was able to reach his current position because he was indeed able to see things on his own. Shurhong could be conferred the title of Marquis, become the commander of the army, and be given the power to command the army. He was not a vegetarian. Just a little consideration, Yesen's plan came into his eyes, but he still made the decision to agree. Not for anything else, but because he had received many imperial edicts from the Daizong Emperor. Now, Biming's real enemy was not Yesen of Wara, but the 5-star army. As long as they could get rid of the 5-star army, the other costs could be ignored. This might be the difference between Yang Qindong and the great Ming dynasty's generals. If someone looked for him and wanted to attack the Han people, sacrificing the Han people's interests, then no matter how great the benefits were, he would not hesitate to refuse. Shi Hung naturally did not have any sense of national honor. In his opinion, the most important thing was to gain the emperor's trust and attention. As for how many people might die in a battle, what did it have to do with him? His power and wealth were not given to him by the people, but by the emperor. He only needed to be responsible to the emperor. Not long after, Yesen walked out of Shi Heng's tent with satisfaction. Then he ordered one of his 4 generals, He, to go to the Biming army to ask for people. The target was Commander Shi Wanshan and the others who had just left the battlefield. Before the war, the Biming army had expanded to a scale of 100,000 people. During the siege of Shicheng, they had fought for more than 10 days. 30,000 people had died and more than 15,000 were injured. In other words, the number of soldiers who could still fight was only 55,000. This time, when Yesen asked Shi Hung for soldiers, he pushed the Biming army out. When He came to the camp of the Biming army and found Shi Wanshan, he told him the purpose of his visit. A teacup was quickly smashed to the ground. Originally, Shi Wanshan wanted to smash the teacup on Hilei's head. However, when he thought that the other party was just following orders, he finally changed the direction of his attack. However, the anger in his heart was not suppressed. He looked at Hilei and said, "General He, I'm afraid you have made a mistake. How about this? Let me go to see the admiral, and we can discuss it later." Hilei saw the murderous anger flashing in Shi Wanshan's body. Thinking that this was originally a matter of the Biming army, he naturally did not want to interfere. He immediately nodded and said, "Of course, I just hope that General Shi can be faster." Of course. Men, send General He out." Shi Wanshan forced a smile and said to the bodyguard beside him. After Hilei was sent out by the bodyguard, Shi Wanshan could not help but punch the wooden table in the tent, causing a burst of things to fall to the ground. "Men, invite General Hu and General Ning here." After a while, Gu He and Ning Wenfeng appeared in the big tent. When they saw that Shi Wanshan's eyes were red and his face was full of anger, they were somewhat puzzled. However, after they figured out what had happened, their situation wasn't any better. They were both extremely angry, especially Gu He, who was so angry that he took out his saber and chopped the table that had fallen to the ground into 2 halves. Intolerable bullying. This is simply intolerable bullying. While venting the dissatisfaction in his heart, Gu He roared loudly, "Yes, this is too much. General, we can't agree. Otherwise, we'll be finished." Ning Wenfeng also changed his calm side. At this moment, he was very anxious. Listening to the words of the 2 generals, Shi Wanshan nodded heavily. "Yes, I'll go and find Commander Shi now. No matter what, we can't treat our brothers like this. This is simply courting death." Mo Beicheng was different from the beginning city. This place had been besieged for more than a year, but Mo Beicheng had never been besieged. Although it might not be as good as before after the supply was cut off, it should not be a problem to be self-sufficient. Mo Beicheng was also a flag in the eyes of the Mongolian people on the grassland. They had spent a lot of effort to build the city. As a place to protect their home, it was abnormally strong. It would be strange if such a city was easy to take down. Basically, it could be concluded that the 50,000 Biming infantrymen's move was equivalent to courting death. Once something happened to these 50,000 people, Shi Wanshan's 100,000 people would only be left with 15,000 wounded and 5,000 soldiers. What was the difference between him and a general without an army? How could a general be called a general without soldiers under his command? At that time, someone could casually find an excuse to take away their position. It was not impossible for them to casually accuse them of something. Even if it was for himself, Shi Wanshan could not let it go this time, not to mention that it involved the lives of 50,000 soldiers. Shi Wanshan left and angrily went to the general tent. This scene had long been discovered by the 5-Star Army's secret agents who were disguised as ordinary soldiers. They did not belong to the Security Bureau or the CIA, but they belonged to Su Dei's private forces. After taking Yang Qindong's money, Su Dei had done a lot of big things. For example, he tried his best to bribe some important people around the general. Except for some personal soldiers, he really bribed a lot of people who were responsible for pouring tea, feeding horses, and cooking. Therefore, he knew a lot of very secret things. For example, when Yes Hen went to look for Shi Hong, he quickly got the news. After knowing the content, he arranged for people to keep an eye on Shi Wanshan's tent. He had a premonition that an opportunity was coming. Shi Wanshan left quickly, but he came back even faster. He still entered the tent angrily. Although Ning Wenfeng had a bad feeling when he saw him like this, he still held a glimmer of hope and asked, "General, what did Admiral Shi say? What else can he say?" This time, he personally promised Yes Hen and said that it can't be changed. Shi Wanshan took a big gulp of cold water after sitting down. "Then can you send less brothers, even if it's only 20,000? The rest can be transferred from other armies." Although Ning Wenfeng knew that it was not easy to change the situation, he still asked with hope. "No." Shi Wanshan shook his head again. Admiral Shi said that the Datong Prefecture soldiers still have to attack the beginning city. There's really no extra troops to be transferred. Now, he can only send us up. Oh, he also said that if Mo Bay City is taken down, our Wangquan Prefecture will have a great merit. At that time, he will propose to the Emperor to commend us. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.